and welcome to the May 11th, 2021 Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting. We're going to begin the meeting this morning with item 1, adjustments to the agenda. Do any commissioners have any adjustments to the agenda? Where is Commissioner Trieger? Ah, yes, Commissioner Trieger. Commissioner Trieger, you're muted.
I can hear her quite clearly through the wall, though.
You're still muted. So given that, my understanding is that you wanted to pull, was it item 7B2? Was that it? You wanted to pull items, Commissioner Trieger would like to pull item 7B2 from the consent calendar. Are there any other adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, is there any emergency business?
No, Chair Bernie, at this time there is not.
Thank you. So we are on item 3, County Council. 3A, this is the second reading and public hearing ordinance 21-01 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 2 to extend time to gather signatures for local measures, adopting a savings and severability clause, adopting a sunset clause. Mr. Dingle, do you want to review this, or would you like me to discuss what we're doing here?
Excuse me, Chair. I'm just logged off and back on. I want to make sure all systems are go. Thank you.
They are. Thank you very much, Commissioner Trieger.
Chair Bernie, I'll just provide a brief background for maybe the folks that are watching on watching the meeting. This is a measure that was brought forward to assist two groups that are began circulating petitions for local measures that were impacted by the COVID pandemic and limited their ability to collect signatures either door to door in traditional large group gatherings where they've done that in the past. The board agreed that both of these measures would be extended by 6 months from their original expiration date. It was also clear that the board wanted this to be a one-time event, hence it has the sunset clause, which means that it will only apply to these two very specific ordinances. The one is the star voting and the other is the Second Amendment sanctuary measure.
Thank you very much. So this is the time set for a second reading and public hearing for ordinance 21-01. As read before, I will now open the public hearing and accept any testimony in support of or in opposition to ordinance 2101. Do any commissioners have a conflict they wish to declare?
Negative.
I see no other commissioners identifying a conflict they wish to declare. Diane, is there any testimony that we have waiting for this on this matter?
Thank you, Chair Bernie. At this time, if you have registered to give public comments on this item, please raise your virtual hand and I will call on you to give your public comment on this item only. If you are registered for general public comment, that will come shortly. Chair Bernie, I do not see anyone wishing to present on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. The public hearing for ordinance 21-01 is now closed, and the chair would entertain a motion.
Chair Bernie.
Yes, Vice Chair.
You know, I'm stumped for a motion. What motion do we need?
We need a motion Mr. Dingle, do we not need a motion to adopt ordinance 21-01?
You do, and I think I sent you the language, proposed language.
Yeah, you did. Commissioner Farr, and you sent that to all commissioners, did you not?
I think I did. Let me find it.
I see it, but as chair, I cannot make a motion.
Right. Vice Chair Farr, it would just be a motion if you just would move that the board adopt the ordinance 21-01 as adopted and then read the title. That will be sufficient.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle, and I'm looking for the language in my email. So, Chair Burney, I would like to move ordinance 21-01 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 2 to extend time to gather signatures for local measures, adopting a savings and severability clause, adopting a sunset clause.
Perfect, Vice Farr. Is there a second? Did I hear Commissioner Bozovich? Yes. Ordinance 21-01 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 2 to extend the time to gather signatures for local measures, adopting a savings and severability clause, adopting a sunset clause, has been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Before I make my comments, I want to confirm with County Council, you had assured me at an earlier date in a conversation that anyone circulating a signature petition, that there's no limit on the number of times a community group can file to have a petition circulated for signatures. Is that correct?
Chair Burney, Commissioner Trigger, yes. If I understand the question, in other words, if neither of these groups obtained the required number of signatures, there'd be nothing to prevent them from filing another petition and making another attempt.
Right, or if they opted, for instance, to recognize that the pandemic had created a delay, and so instead they scrapped their current petitions and applied to start fresh, they would have a 2-year clock starting fresh now, the virtual entirety of which would be a post-pandemic timeline rather than trying to tack on an additional 6 months to a current calendar. Is that correct?
Chair Burney, Commissioner Trigger, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. So my comments, and I raised this when this first came to our attention, I find it interesting that we've received no public comment in favor. And in fact, the only public comment I've received is through email and was opposed to us adopting this ordinance. And if the purpose of this is to make it easier for community members and citizen initiatives to move forward, and we have no citizen input, save for one person contacting one commissioner, I have concerns about us adopting an ordinance based on one person contacting one commissioner and then having no further public comment on the item. It feels like a solution in search of a problem. I know Commissioner Bozovich gave some analogies about some other dispensations we've made during the pandemic, but to me, those are completely apples to oranges, talking about the non-conforming use policies and so on with recurring events that have major economic impacts on our community and on the people involved is completely different than something like this. As County Council just acknowledged, these petitioners can file for a new signature gathering petition anytime. So our action doesn't create or prevent an opportunity from them accessing a system. And finally, there are established cases that went all the way to the Supreme Court here in Oregon from last year during the pandemic, where petitioners were requesting a reduction in the number of required signatures and an adjustment to the timeline because of the pandemic. And that was for a time-sensitive matter. This is not time-sensitive. So I don't see a need for us to adopt an ordinance based on one person contacting one commissioner, as well as with the other reasons that I've stated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners that would like to comment? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Chair. So first, I'd like to point out that, yes, you can restart a petition anytime if you fail to gather signatures or quit and restart. There is a cost to that. particularly if you started your petition at a time when you were paying signature gatherers and then the paid signature gatherers had to stop due to the pandemic, which is the case of one of these petitions. So there is that. And there is also just, as citizens making law, which is what our petition process does and our initiative process allows, they want to enact that law quite often as soon as possible. And in particular cases, it may be timely, and in some ways it also might affect, missing election cycles, which is in particular one of these initiatives affects our elections. So, it's all fine to say, yeah, they can just start over. And in the case of the courts, all those were state initiatives. They weren't county initiatives. And as a home rule county, we have the ability to do this. And it's a large difference between, what you were talking about. And that was request actually by the petitioners to change rules, not by the actual government to change the rules. If the state legislature had voted to extend gathering or lower the signature amounts, that might have been different. So we have the power to do this. We're our home rule county. I do feel that it's in line and fair to these petitioners. There's only 2 petitions that were circulating and been filed during the pandemic. It was the chief petitioner that contacted me, and I believe he's also talked to other members of the board beside myself about getting an extension of the one petition that has impacts on our elections. So if it is delayed another 2 years, it's going to miss a few more election cycles. So I am all in favor of making it as easy as possible for our citizens to access this citizens initiative process. And basically what we're doing here is trying to, do what we did for other organizations during the pandemic, which is to change the rules and deadlines a little bit so that they can continue to function. And I don't see this as being as unnecessary. It's not harmful. It doesn't cause any harm. All it does is allow easier access to the initiative process. So I see a vote against this ordinance actually is a vote against allowing people to make law for themselves. And if you're against the initiative process, then go ahead, vote against this ordinance. But if you support the initiative process and support easy access to that initiative process and understand that there needs to be some changes in the rules during a pandemic for those that were caught by the pandemic while gathering signatures, then vote yes. It's as simple as that. It's going to be a roll call vote because it is an ordinance, and your vote will be recorded.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners that would like to speak to this? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I initially had my head nod on this because there are some portions of what Commissioner said that made sense to me. People have been stuck in their homes, and when there's initiatives going around, they're not able to always get those signatures. It's been actually quite challenging for a number of things all over the state, a number of measures and initiatives all over the state. Although I was anticipating some kind of testimony of some sort from people who were interested in having this ordinance. Neither entities that would be affected with this ordinance have provided any testimony. And if there aren't folks asking for this, I haven't heard anybody contact me either personally by email, any written testimony that are letting us know that this is something that they're interested in. And when I don't hear the people ask for something that they need, such as this, it seems seems like it's not necessary if people aren't really out there advocating. We've had lots of folks come and testify in front of us for other things, asking for ordinances, and then they've been in large numbers, and we haven't heard from anybody at all today. So for that reason, I'm not sure that I'm gonna be voting for something that people aren't requesting.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Just a quick refresher, Mr. Dingle, and I do not remember, during the first reading, was there any public testimony that was either submitted or presented? Does anybody have any recollection of that?
I don't believe there was, but I'm not sure. I've only had one. The only communication I've had about this is I think I was included on an email from I believe it's Mr. Frohnmeyer with the Star Voting group.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle, and thank you for that refresher. Now, for years now, literally, we've been receiving input from Mr. Frohnmeyer and other people supporting Star Voting, a great deal of input, volumes of input, and which led to the preparation of this ordinance. So I'm in favor of moving forward with this, allowing them, as Commissioner Bozovich said, a freer access to the citizen involvement in lawmaking.
Is there any other discussion? Yes, Mr. Mokrahysky.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Chair Bernie, commissioners. I'm at a bit of a loss here. I do know that there's been, that this started with initial contacts to the county clerk's office. And I'm not sure how many contacts there were for, since in so many counties, the county clerk is an elected position. There are times when that office is petitioned with regards to work under its jurisdiction. And I know that this issue was initiated there, but I can't tell you about the volume of interest or the comments that arrived there. And it certainly, it's true that the comments have not come to the board. But this was an initiative started by an effort trying to lobby the county clerk.
Thank you very much for the clarification. My only comment would be that we're so far along. I didn't see objections as we were going through the process. We've allocated time to do this. Requests were made on multiple fronts, and I don't know. I feel oftentimes decisions can be made by how many people under the radar get lined up to provide testimony on a particular topic to members of this board when we're voting on topics. And the fact that that has not occurred on this particular item is not, honestly, until I heard the concern from Commissioners Trieger and Buck, I hadn't even thought about this. I just thought this was something that was moving forward. So I'm left with questions, really. Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify for the record, I raised my concerns at the first reading when we first had this conversation, and it was clarified for me that all I was being asked to do was to vote to advance the process. But I had indicated early on that I had concerns about the need for this ordinance. So I made clear to petitioners or to anyone interested in this topic on either side that I had concerns. And I did just take a quick look in my email, and I will say I've received a grand total of 3 emails on this topic. One that I was copied on and one directly to me from someone in opposition.
Thank you for correcting my COVID brain, Commissioner. I would like to ask a question, and I really mean this in all sincerity. Commissioner Trieger, like, why would you see this as a negative as opposed to a neutral?
Thank you, Chair. You know, writ large, I don't. It's really a process concern. As I said, if the idea is this is a citizen initiative and this is about citizen engagement and citizens are not engaging, including the chief petitioner, who I haven't heard from and is someone who is someone I have a relationship and a connection to. It's just, it just gives me my impression of the process so far is that one commissioner was directly contacted by one person, and that we're moving an ordinance forward based on that one communication. It should not have anything to do with the content of the petition, although I hear people now talking about the content of the petition. In fact, there are two petitions, and I made clear in my earlier comments that my position on this as a procedural vote has nothing to do with, and it should have nothing to do with, the content of the petitions or anyone trying to advance a particular decision or opportunity to a change to any other systems or laws. So this has nothing to do for me with the content of either of these petitions or the issues that they're trying to forward. It's a great conflict for me. I have a real challenge with this, but I'm just being hard pressed and tried to give opportunity for the people who are asking for this to actually ask for it, and that hasn't happened.
Thank you for responding to my question. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. And I just want to say the only reason I made reference to some of the content of the petitions was in response to what happens if we don't do this and people have to refile and restart a 2-year clock. That there is a time impact to them based on what they're petitioning for. That's the only reason I brought it up, not because I support or am opposed to either of the petitions. Like Commissioner Trieger said, this decision on this particular ordinance should be content neutral. To me, it's about being fair, and lots of things to this board with a single citizen contacting one commissioner and a commissioner bringing something forward to the board. So just to be fair, and I think the reason we're not hearing from the chief petitioner today is I think there was some assumption that this was kind of just a procedural matter and it was going to pass based on watching any of the prior discussions. There didn't seem to be strong opposition other than then Commissioner Trieger is right. She did explain she had some misgivings about this early on, but continued to vote for moving the process forward. But none of the rest of the commissioners expressed any misgivings or opposition. So that's probably why we did not hear public testimony, because I think people thought it wasn't needed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Buck. I see.
Thank you, Chair. For most ordinances that our public is interested in us passing, we at least get some written testimony of some kind. I would have loved to hear from somebody who would have been affected by this to know one way or the other. Because even if, I don't really know whether they thought they needed to be present or not. I mean, if this was an important, resident initiative, usually we would hear a lot of people coming in because it's important from a political point of view of whatever initiative or they're trying to pass. And I would just impress upon the public, if they're watching this, if there is something you want the Board of Commissioners to pass or do, you need to contact us and write in and let us know, because right now, with not even one piece of testimony, I'm just not there.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'm sorry, Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Throughout the history of at least one of these ordinances, one of these petition campaigns, we've received a great deal of input. I've spoke with beginning quite a number of years ago. That being said, sometimes we have public hearings at night that we publicize a long time in advance and 0 people show up for that. It's a tough time for people to, I think, focus on when a Board of County Commissioners is holding a public hearing. That being said, Mr. Dingle, a question for you. If I were to withdraw my motion to move the ordinance and move move a third reading in order to notify people that would like to hear from them if they're in favor or against it. How unwieldy would that be?
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Vice Chair Farr, that wouldn't be unwieldy at all. Let's move it to a third hearing. Or third, yeah.
Then I'll look to the seconder of the motion for a withdrawal and a subsequent motion to schedule a third reading and public hearing.
Yeah, I'd be willing to have that motion to do a continued public hearing and third reading to provide that opportunity, because I imagine we will hear more testimony based on the fact that there was an expression of lack of support to mean that there wasn't an interest in having this passed.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Then, Mr. Chair, I would withdraw my motion to move the ordinance 21-01. And we just heard the agreement of the second on that, so I guess my motion is withdrawn.
Yeah.
And I would like to make a substitute motion or a second motion, which would be move the second reading and schedule a third reading and public hearing on ordinance 21-01. And Mr. Dingle, can you provide a time on that, or shall we insert the time at a later date?
I was hoping that Ms. Jones might jump on.
I'm on the line.
Okay.
We do need to insert a date and a time in there so that it can, this is the notice of that. So I apologize, you caught me off guard, so I'm looking at when we can do this.
Trust me,
With
you're not the only one.
Mr. Dingle, we could do this on May 25th at 9 a.m. following your other second reading and public hearing on that's coming up, or we could move it into June sometime. Do you have a preference?
Mr. Rickoff, is there any concern about the one petition running out of time on their signature gathering? I think we get into June, we're getting into their deadline.
I believe that's the case, but I don't have the dates in front of me. Mr. Dingle?
I believe the first one was July.
Okay.
I want to say like July 27th sticks in my head, but let me check.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Just want to make sure before we set something for June or a delay from May 25th.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
the expiration date for the star voting measure is July 26, 2021. And since there's not an emergency clause on this, it would take effect 30 days after that. So if you get into June, you are getting there. And if you added an emergency clause, then it would need to have another public hearing.
Vice Chair Farr, we're looking at the motion, and what I've heard is that May 25th would be the first date that would be possible to be heard.
So our choice is on May 25th or June 8th, it would appear, because we don't have a meeting on June 1st. So I'm going to insert May 25th with a 9 a.m. time certain.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
So I don't have it in front of me, but I believe that Vice Chair Farr has moved and Commissioner Bozovich has seconded moving ordinance 21-01 to a third hearing to occur May 25th, 2021. Is that correct?
Which includes the second reading, yes.
Okay. Is there discussion to that motion? Seeing none, does this still require a roll call vote? No. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich, for being my legal assistant. I mean that in all sincerity. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, which essentially moves Ordinance 21-01 to a third reading, May 25th. Please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. So the motion has now been unanimously approved, 5-0, made by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Bozevich, to move ordinance 21-01 to a third hearing, May 25th. Thank you. I would simply also like to say, for setting agendas, this is an example of, we anticipated this would not take a long time, took a little bit longer than anticipated. It's pushed public comment. And so the chair at least hates to see anything placed before public comment on an agenda, out of respect for those making public comment, having lives and having to wait through this. But thank you very much. Okay, give me a second. Oh, my goodness. We are now on item 4, public comment. To the public watching and/or participating, you are currently registered in this remote meeting platform as attendees, which means you are a webinar participant watching the meeting. Your microphone and webcam are automatically muted as attendees. We are now beginning the public comment time on our agenda. If you wish to participate in public comment, I will ask you to raise your virtual hand to be recognized. You should see a hand icon on the device you are using to watch the meeting. Press once to raise your hand. When public comment begins, Diana will call names. When your name is called, you will be unmuted and given up to 3 minutes to make your comments. When your 3 minutes are up, you will return to your muted status and the next speaker's name will be called. You can then continue to watch the webinar as long as you choose. The intent is for everyone wishing to make public comment to have that opportunity. Please note that if there are a large number of people wishing to make testimony, we may need to reduce by a bit the time for each public comment. Diana, are there any hands raised for public comment?
Thank you, Chair Bernie. At this time, if you have registered to give public comments during this meeting, please raise your virtual hand and I will call on you to give your public comments. Chair Bernie, I do not see anyone raising their virtual hands to speak, so I will listen to you.
Thank you. At this point, do any commissioners wish to make any comments or identify other issues? Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to share that we have seen Senate Bill 405 pass both chambers and is on to the governor's desk for signatures. This particular bill is specific to non-conforming use. Senator Przansky was one of the lead sponsors. And it will extend the timeline for non-conforming use building from 12 months to 2025. It's not only for wildfire evacuees. There are a lot of events that happen on non-conforming use land that haven't been able to happen due to the pandemic. And normally, once 12 months has passed, you have to reapply and do a lot of work to even attempt to do what you were doing before all over again. So this gives a nice long pause for that rule to apply. And it also pulls a lot of people out of this weird purgatory place when rebuilding upriver. So I'm very excited that it's going to the governor's desk. We hope it's going to be signed very soon. In addition to that, I was able to testify on Friday morning for Senate Bill 3127, which is, I testified in front of the House Wildfire Committee, and that is a conglomeration bill of all the asks from all the 7 wildfire affected counties for everything that they need in order to begin to rebuild. This is a bill that exceeds $1 billion, which is a stunning example of the effect of wildfires, megafires, on our whole state. It shows that there's a lot of hope ahead, probably exceeds what the state can actually afford. But they will be moving that to Friday. They meet again this Friday. We continue to watch and testify as needed, and we'll see what it does as it moves into joint meetings or onto the Senate Wildfire Recovery. I also testified on Senate Bill 745, which is a bill that will assist an existing district to add a sanitary district to it. It is a way to facilitate Blue River's sanitary system being added to its water district. It doesn't provide any money. It's just a logistical issue because they don't have enough people to vote it in. Clearly, there wasn't enough rooftops to do that initially. And now there's clearly no rooftops to do that. And there's no way to get a vote. So this is a way to bypass that system and still be able to facilitate what's needed in order to recover up there. There are some other areas, other counties that this will be useful for as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. It sounds like you've been a bit busy. Are there any other commissioners that would like to make statements at this time?
Chair Bernie, may I interrupt for one moment?
You just did.
Sorry, it does appear that we have some it does appear we do have someone who would like to give public comment. I do see a hand now raised. Would you like to go back to public comment?
With the permission of all commissioners, since this was your moment to respond, would that be all right? Okay. Yes, please, Diane.
Okay. Mr. Maxwell, I do show that your hand is raised for public comments. I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your testimony and I will begin the timer. I do show you are self-muted, Mr. Maxwell.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for your time to speak. My name is Sean Maxwell. I am here to speak regarding a property in Lane County, bordering the Heilman County Park off of Heilman Lane. The map and tax lot number is 1604250001000. It's owned by Dan Davis, and access to this property is behind a Lane County owned gate at the end of Heilman Lane. He has had a key to this gate in the past that worked. Currently, the key does not work to the lock. We've been in touch with Todd Bowen of Lane County Parks, who's to this point has not provided a new key for access to this gate. It's been about 3 months that we've been working on this process to get a new key, but so far he has not been willing to provide a new key. There was an email sent regarding this issue and included Commissioner Farr last week. The last time a key was issued, Mike Russell was the manager at the time, and that we do hold that key still. We're just simply trying to swap the key for a new key to gain access to that gate, which is the only access road to the property at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Chair Bernie, that is the only hand I saw raised. You may now, I return the meeting back to you. I apologize for the interruption.
Oh, no, that's fine. Would any other commissioners like to speak either to that last testimony or to whatever other items? Commissioner Farr. Commissioner Farr, you're muted.
Thanks. There used to be a boat landing at the end of Howman Lane that was washed out one winter during a high water event. And I don't believe that county park is really active anymore. I see no reason to not issue the key, which has already been issued. Commissioner Bozievich, I believe that is in your district. So, so the end of River Loop 2, I believe, is where Howman Lane begins. But I'll send a message to County Parks, Mr. Rickoff, and copy you on that to ask for that issuance of the key.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Any other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bozievich.
Actually, I think you're thinking of Whitley Boat Landing. It's off of River Loop 2. Heilman Lane's further to the north, and Heilman Lane comes off of River Road. And I'm aware. Yeah. It's a little frustrating to hear that Parks is being reluctant about issuing that key. It seems like that's a common access, and there should be some requirement to provide that access, but I don't know the legal standing of the access road. But I would encourage our Parks folks to resolve that. If they've issued a key before, that seems like a simple thing to issue a key again. So hopefully, Mr. Maxwell, that'll get resolved. And I also appreciate the email you sent while we were discussing the other item earlier that supports approving that ordinance. So we did get an email while we were talking about it in support of the ordinance. And I just got a note from one of the chief petitioners that thought it was a done deal and had already been approved. He didn't even realize we were holding a hearing today. So word got back to him about the issue. So I'm happy that we rolled that to a third reading and public hearing, and I want to thank the board for that. I'm sure we'll hear testimony.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners that would like to speak? Seeing none, we are on item 5 now on our agenda, County Administration, COVID-19 Response and Recovery. I think Mr. Rickoff will take over and Mr. Adams on this item.
Chair Bernie, commissioners, thank you. I do believe this is our chance to hear for both fire and COVID response. So it might be that Matt McCray is with us this morning. Matt, are you around?
Mr. Rickoff, today is only a COVID response. We do not have. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong agenda because I'm one-handed. You're correct. It has Mr. McCray online.
By the way, thank you, Greg. I'm looking at so many damn agendas that I was looking at the wrong one also. So please take it away as we should.
No harm done. Matt, it looks like your camera might not be working, but do we have audio?
Yeah, my audio is working, and I'm trying to get my webcam to work. My apologies here. It is on the way.
Okay, well, and go ahead with your report. Oh, there you are.
Great.
Good morning. Well, there you go.
There I go.
Why don't you go ahead and give your report, and we will continue on. I'll go ahead if you have. Oh, you're back.
Yeah. And while that is occurring, Matt, I want to apologize to you. You are item 6A, monthly holiday farm fire update. We apologize for the confusion. Please continue.
No trouble, Chair Bernie. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Bernie, commissioners. Thank you, as always, for making the time for an update. For those joining us remotely, my name is Matt McCray, and I serve as the Disaster Recovery Manager for Lane County. My work is focused on wildfire recovery in the area of the Holiday Farm Fire. I want to start by thanking you, Commissioner Buck, for the update on state legislation related to wildfire. I appreciate your attention to and commitment to securing legislative support for recovery activities at the state level. I want to reiterate the significance of the $1 billion recovery proposal that's before legislators right now. I think the statewide impacts absolutely warrant that kind of investment. As with other wildfire recovery updates for this board, I won't read all of the brief for you, but I just want to highlight the important changes. So starting at the top, last month when I reported to you, we had just over 185 wildfire survivors who remain in sheltered in hotels, and that number has dropped slightly. It's just over 180 survivors now sheltering in hotels. I also want to call your attention to the FEMA direct housing mission. FEMA and the property owner in Rainbow are very close to finalizing a lease agreement on the direct housing mission. I was hoping to give big exciting news for you today, but we're not quite there, but hopeful that in the next couple of days, we'll be able to collectively celebrate the securing of that agreement. So that is ongoing. County staff are working on permits, et cetera, to make sure that that happens. Looking at permitting specifically, the permitting team, the County land management staff, are delivering a Q&A online to help wildfire survivors get their permitting questions answered. They have 2 dates set up, the 12th of May and again on the 26th. I think for me, this demonstrates a firm commitment on behalf of our land management division to make sure that people have access to as much information as possible to make the permitting process as easy as possible. And of course, as you all recall, they're hiring 7 additional staff at your direction to assist with the permitting process. So those changes combined, I think, are going to make the permit process significantly easier and quicker for wildfire survivors. Appreciate your collective leadership on that front. I want to call your attention also to the item on disaster case managers. So the state is funding a total of 6 disaster case managers. So when we reported out previously, I had mentioned that the state was going to hire 2, which those 2 state hired positions should start this week, which is fantastic. But the state is also providing funding for 4 additional disaster case managers in our area, which is really significant because those are the people that work one-on-one with individuals and families to identify needs and help people get their needs met. So I think that's a really great development. Those additional 4 positions will be hired under a community-based organization. On the subject of debris removal, I just want to highlight that the cleanup, the debris removal has been going smoothly. No issues at the landfill, which is fantastic. And we are setting a deadline now for right of entry. So it's important that, and of course we'll promote this in channels communicating directly to wildfire survivors, but for you, commissioners, you may hear about this as well. In order to have debris cleared on a private property at no charge to the property owner, a property owner has to provide a right of entry form and register with ODOT for that particular service. And the deadline for doing that will be June 1st. There's been plenty of time and a lot of promotion of this program, so I don't foresee a lot of challenges with that particular deadline, but it is being established based on the availability of the contractors in the area. And the last item I want to call your attention to is on mitigation. This update is squarely focused on disaster recovery, disaster mitigation being those actions that we would do to prevent damage on the front end of a disaster as opposed to recovering after a disaster. But I think it's important to highlight the fact that we are going into another likely to be very severe wildfire season. And so other staff in emergency management, specifically Patience Whittingham, are taking major steps, as well as our partners at eWeb, which is this item is about, taking major steps to make sure that we are doing all that we can to prevent damage in the case of future wildfires, and in this case, in terms of snowstorms too. FEMA awarded Eugene Water and Electric Board more than $1.1 million to harden electric infrastructure against future snow events, wildfire, and other disasters. And just a disclaimer, I don't believe there's a conflict of interest, but I do want to acknowledge that I sit on the board of the Eugene Water and Electric Board as of January. That's all I had by way of presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCray. Are there any questions for Mr. McCray? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie, and a belated congratulations on your election to the board, to the board, Mr. McCray. You'll bring a great deal of expertise and forward thinking to that board.
Thank you.
Just a question regarding the permitting staff that's been hired. What is the training curve for that permitting staff? How quickly are they actually going to be online and able to process permits?
I don't think I'm going to have a super detailed answer for you there. What I can say is that Land Management Division is specifically seeking people with experience because the learning curve can be very steep. So they are seeking applicants who have already had experience, specifically with state land use law. That's where a lot of the barriers tend to reside. So I don't know. I think it does depend, of course, on the applicant and the applicant pool as to how much training there will be. I do believe that those individuals will be put into service just as swiftly as possible, but I can't really hazard a guess as to the date that would happen. I can get back to you with an answer on that in writing if you'd like.
You know, Mr. McCray, don't spend any great deal of time researching that because there's research being done on that already. And Ms. Rakoff, I'll mention that I've heard that it takes a long time to put somebody in the permit process. That there's a great, massive learning curve that sometimes it can take a long time. So I'll just be in touch with Public Works and with Mr. Rakoff, Mr. Mokrajewski separate to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bozievich, should I see your hand?
Thank you, Chair. Matt and maybe Commissioner Buck can actually answer this question also. There is a bill, House Bill 2289, which would basically allow for replacement of a lot of these structures without having to deal with the land use side of the process. Basically grandfathers many things in, from septic systems to the dwellings. Do we know the status of that? I believe it's made its way through most of the House hearing process. It has an emergency clause on it, so the sooner it passes, the sooner we wouldn't have to have staff fully trained in every piece of Oregon land use law to deal with the permitting process. Do we know whether that bill's moving and how fast?
Commissioner Buck, it looks like you may have the answer to that. I do not.
Yes, I've been following that one pretty closely as well. It is moving and it seems to have support. It's in the Senate at the moment. And they continue to have wildfire joint Senate House committee meetings quite often as things have a deadline coming up. But this would really speed up the process for people that are in not a straight, easy, narrow way to rebuild, because we know in rural communities that is not necessarily common. But I do anticipate this moving. It had a public hearing just recently, may have even been yesterday. So as soon as I hear more, I'll let the board know as well. But I think it will most likely move forward.
Excellent. I did notice it did pass the House 56-4.
Commissioner Bozievich, are you through? I wanted to, I'm sorry, yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McCray. Just a quick question. On last Friday's statewide commissioners call with the OHA and disaster relief folks, it was mentioned that FEMA had communicated or indicated they were, quote, re-engaging with people who were initially denied assistance to troubleshoot their applications. Is that something that these community-based organizations that we're working with for disaster case management will be trained to assist people in? Is that something FEMA is doing directly? How do people who had applied for FEMA relief and were rejected know that they might have another go at it?
Thanks, Commissioner Trieger. Good question. Yes, so you're correct that FEMA was looking to re-engage wildfire survivors on the ground to support those who had been denied benefits, to see if there were alternatives or other avenues for them to get benefits from FEMA. That was put on hold temporarily just because the COVID risk in the county escalated, and so they stepped away from that for the time being. But my understanding is that FEMA do still intend to re-engage with survivors on that front. The disaster case managers that we're looking to hire through local community-based organizations would be focused primarily on helping wildfire survivors and families access private resources more than FEMA resources. So those disaster case managers should be familiar with and paying attention to the FEMA process, but they're actually primarily supporting other resources, both nonprofit and private resources that come into our community to support recovery.
Great.
Does that answer your question? Great. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Mr. McCray, you talked about the FEMA housing mission for not just us, but the public. How many specifically units is that, and what size of units?
So the plan right now is for between 17 and 20 manufactured homes to go on that site. They would be manufactured homes on the order of 40 to 50 feet long. So they would house a family of 2 to 4, possibly more depending on the families. But you can imagine then that it's quite a number of people if that's completely filled. At this point, FEMA, the list that FEMA has of families that want to enter that space and use those homes is they just have 10 families that are waiting for space. They initially had a higher number. It has dropped off over time as people have found other solutions. However, it's possible that once that housing mission is built out, that there will be renewed interest in those additional spaces.
And just to get a bit more granular, so what happens after these manufactured homes are no longer needed by fire victims? Does the county own them? What's the disposition of them?
That's a great question, Chair Bernie. So these direct housing missions are typically set for 18 months from the date of the event, when we're 8 months in. So we would expect them to be approved for another 10 months. FEMA recognizes that that things are moving slowly here in terms of getting that direct housing mission built. And there is an expectation, not only in our area, but in other fire affected areas, that the counties will request to have an extension beyond that initial 18 months. So we would expect those will likely be in place for at least, well, I guess I won't speculate, except that I know that we will be asking for an extension. Once those homes are decommissioned, FEMA removes those trailers from the property. They do not become property of the county or of the property owner. They'll remove those from the site. There's a question as to whether or not the infrastructure will remain in place. That's currently in discussion right now in terms of the hookups and the pads. There's a question of whether or not some or all of those will be allowed to remain under state land use law.
Thank you. And then if I may, I'm not reading this because I advance the sentiments of what I'm reading, but it leads to my next question. And this is a text I received about a week ago from a friend who has 12 customers because he does drafting for new homes and additions or what have you. And he sent a letter into the county 6 weeks ago. And it reads, "In 6 weeks, less than nothing. I'm starting to think that land management is intentionally delaying these permits until they can find a reason to deny them. People are going to start flipping out." Now, obviously, that's not the intent of land management. But are you experiencing this level of frustration with people that are attempting to move forward with permits, one? And two, if the legislation that Commissioner Bozovich asked about, that Commissioner Buck shared with us, its movement, how much will that reduce waiting? How much efficiency will that generate for these poor people that are trying to rebuild?
I would say, Chair Bernie, thank you for the question. I would say yes, when I interact with survivors, there are a number, not all, but there are a number who are frustrated with the time required for permits. And I would say part of that is, well, of course, these folks, many of them do not have a current permanent place to live. And so the urgency to get something built is high. Their lives are in disarray. The urgency, again, extremely high. And many of them may or may not have actually interfaced with a permitting system in the past to build a home, right? Many of us buy a home that's already been built. We don't experience or necessarily understand as homeowners the fairly lengthy process required for the permitting process to take place. So yes, there's absolutely frustration. And I think some of it is just because folks haven't interfaced with this system before. I will say when I talk with our team in land management, in planning and in building permits, across the board, they are doing everything they can to make permits move as fast as possible, to make the process as painless as possible. It doesn't mean it's painless, but it means they're doing everything they can to make it happen swiftly. I don't see any intent on behalf of our staff to slow the process. And to your last, go ahead.
No, of course not. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And to your last question, there's, to the extent that this new legislation reduces the barriers of state land use policy, that is significant. My understanding in talking with our staff is that the land use side is where the biggest constraints are, where the most time is required for permit processing and approval. So to the extent that those barriers are removed, it would significantly speed the process of permitting for survivors.
Thank you, Matt. I have one last question that I will ask. There's many questions I'm sure all of us have. But you discussed in passing contractor availability in rebuilding, which raises a whole other plethora of issues. Is there any activity with either Lane Workforce Partnership or some of the community colleges, the community college, or any of the groups to start aggressively getting people through training to deal with that? Because that is a shortage that is going to also hamper the speed and efficiency with which we can recover, much less with which I can get electrical work done in my house.
Yeah, it's a good question, Chair Bernie, and I didn't address the increasing cost of lumber. As you all are probably very aware, the price of lumber is just skyrocketing. I didn't bring it up largely because it's completely out of our collective control. It's not anything that the county has influence over. But yes, not only the price of materials, but also the cost of construction and labor is going up. Yes, we are seeing that the potential for that bottleneck that you're addressing with regard to construction and trade labor. The staff at Lane County have reached out to Lane Workforce Partnership to see if there are opportunities to try and reduce that bottleneck. We feel like largely it's going to be at the state level where that intervention is going to have to happen if it's going to happen. As I understand it, talking with staff at Oregon Emergency Management who understand building permits far better than I do, the constraint around trade labor, specifically the electricians, the plumbers, the metal, sheet metal workers, et cetera, there's a bottleneck in the availability of contractors who can take on an apprenticeship, and that bottleneck is created at the state level. It is at the state level. There's a limit on the number of apprentices a contractor can take on, and so if we wanted to really open up that bottleneck, it's going to require the removal or adjustment of that particular barrier. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does. It will actually relate to a future board assignment I might make today. But thank you very much. Are there any other commissioner questions for Mr. McCray? Excellent report, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the time.
but
Thank you,
I've
Matt.
been spending a lot of time lately dealing with this issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair Bernie.
6A, COVID-19 response and recovery. We have Mr. Rickoff and Mr. Adams.
And I will let Mr. Adams go forward with his report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rickoff. Chair Bernie, commissioners, good morning. Always a pleasure to be with you. As always, I am going to share my slide deck as soon as I have the ability to do so. Okay, wonderful. All right, so commissioners, I'm pleased to provide first and foremost an update on our case count. As you know, I appeared before you last Tuesday looking specifically at our risk numbers and thinking that we were going to remain another week in extreme risk. A little later that day, last Tuesday, just after 5 p.m., the governor announced that the statewide rate of change metric came in at 14.9 as opposed to 15% change week on week, and used that occasion to reduce risk levels across the 15 counties that had been placed in extreme the week prior. So effective this past Friday, Lane County and the other counties who had been affected stepped back down into the high risk category. I think, as you see, these are the latest case numbers as of this morning, 12,921 cases to date. That's an increase of 50 over the last 24 hours. And we're currently tracking 251 individuals in Lane County as currently infectious. So I think as you look specifically across the state of Oregon, we've been reporting around 800 new cases per day. That's a bit of a flattening and a plateau, in fact, of our case levels. And we've been on average around our pro rata share. So in the 70 to 80 new case per day range is where we have been over the last several days. If you look nationally, we had 2.12 million average cases. That's doses. If you look specifically at the case rate across the country, we're now down to new cases equivalent to where we were of June of last year, which is the lowest we've seen in some time. So we're seeing a reduction in cases nationwide. We, I think, knocking on wood here, amply appear to not be following the kind of spring increase that we saw across the upper Midwest, particularly in Michigan a few weeks back. We had our increase, but we appear to be kind of flattening out now. Our local hospital capacity remains quite good. We have 17 individuals in hospital. We had 1 discharge over the last 24 hours. We have 8 individuals in ICU beds. We've had a reported death, bringing us to 146 as well. So I think that the difference between what's happening in the Pacific Northwest now versus what happened 4 to 6 weeks ago in the upper Midwest is that our vaccination rates are higher now than was the case then. And we're now beginning to see the impacts of a robust vaccination rollout. So we received last evening an update to our county risk metrics. Here you'll see that Lane County trended down from 228.1 last week for our 2-week average to 211.9. You'll see a similar trend down in the statewide numbers from 263 to 252. And you'll see a reduction here locally, a very small reduction in our test positivity rate from 3.7 to 3.6. So we remain at high risk and anticipate no change to that. The statewide hospital metric now was likewise updated this morning, and we saw a reduction of 2.3% week on week. So that does not trigger the extreme risk criteria that the governor and that OHA laid out previously. So the governor does speak today at 1:30. We do not have knowledge of what she will be addressing beyond understanding that she will be speaking about vaccination and potentially incentives to spur vaccination efforts more broadly. So I think the sum total of where we are with respect to this most recent surge in cases is that we appear to be beginning to level off, and we are very much looking forward to hopefully a very rapid decline. So as we have discussed in prior weeks, vaccination really at this point is the way forward. Getting as many individuals vaccinated in Lane County is the surest way to get us out of any risk of moving into extreme or high risk or any risk levels ultimately. So these are the latest numbers as of this morning. Lane County has vaccinated here 188,179 people. That includes 147,000 folk for whom the series is complete, either 2 shots of Pfizer or Moderna or 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson. We now have 40,000 people who have received 1 shot. So our current vaccination rate for the population as a whole is 49.3%, having received at least 1 dose. And some very significant developments as we are looking to the near term. Yesterday, the administrator of the Food and Drug Administration approved Pfizer vaccine for individuals aged 12 to 15 years of age. You'll recall that Pfizer had originally been approved for 16 and above. Different than Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, which are both approved under the emergency use authorization for 18 plus. So we understand that the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices at the Centers for Disease Control will take this issue up in an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, our time. And that will be followed by a second level of approval from the CDC administrator tomorrow. We have been in touch with OHA. We know that the Western States Alliance will review the work coming from the CDC once that arrives, and then OHA approval is imminent. So we are anticipating being in a position of being able to offer a vaccine to individuals aged 12 to 15 in very short order, in fact, as soon as this weekend. So as we look at our population numbers, we are looking at 17,000 individuals in that 12 to 15 age range. So that will expand our eligible population from 325 individuals, 325,000 to 342,000. So when you do the calculations of our vaccination rates, we're currently at 62% of our eligible population. But when you add that 17,000 to the figure, that will drop us down to 58,000. 58% of vaccination rates. We're very excited about the development of the 12 to 15-year-olds moving into the eligibility category. As I look at over the last 2 weeks of case data, and I look specifically at the age range of 5 to 18, we have 160 reported positives in that age range. So the number of individuals who are now newly eligible, as soon as we get final approvals expected as this week progresses, accounts for 34.4% of those cases. Another 22% of those cases are 16 and 17-year-olds. So this far and away accounts for a good proportion of the case rates that we've seen within our adolescent and child cases. And we see this as being critical, together with our efforts to vaccinate our 20-somethings as well. So as we look specifically at where vaccine is headed, we've provided and completed vaccinations for 82% of our 70 plus population in Wayne County. For individuals in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, as a whole, we have vaccinated 57% of those individuals. And for individuals currently 16 to 29, we've vaccinated 37% of those individuals. So we are, obviously the eligibility has been, they have not had eligibility for vaccination for as long as some of the older individuals in our population. But this is clearly where we need to see vaccination efforts focused. As we, and I will just take my slide deck down. So as we look forward to where we are in the process, we are seeing a overall reduction in the relative rate of vaccination uptake here in Wayne County. That is not dissimilar to what we're seeing across the country. We have assuredly cleared the queue of the individuals for whom vaccination was number 1, number 2, or number 3 on their to-do lists. We're now very much working into the population for whom vaccination is a little bit lower on their to-do list. We've begun to pivot some of our vaccination efforts to really kind of think about reaching those for whom convenience might be a higher priority. So providing evening clinics is something that we've been doing. Smaller clinics, 600-seat clinics, running from 4 to 7 p.m., for instance, at both the fairgrounds and at Autzen Stadium. Doing Friday afternoon clinics at Autzen Stadium this past Friday, for instance, yielded a significant number of doses for us. So we will continue to move in that direction. President Biden last week set a goal of vaccinating 70% of the adult population by July 4th. And just as a thought experiment, we were very keen to see how Wayne County was tracking on that trajectory. So over the last 2 weeks or so, we've been, on average, all providers, including Wayne County Public Health, but also our pharmacies and our primary care providers, have been averaging about 3,000 doses a day here in Wayne County. So we, over the period of time from the weekend, we needed to inoculate about 35,000 adults. So that's assuming that those 35 individuals will need 2 shots. So if you do the math, if we can maintain this 3,000 per day pace, we will hit that 70% of our adult population target by May 31. If we drop to 2,000 doses a day, that will lengthen the time out to 35 days, and we will hit that by June 11th. If we reduce by half, if we're only able to average 1,500 doses a day moving forward, that would take us 47 days, and we would hit that mark by June 23rd. So Wayne County continues to outpace both the state as a whole and the national average in terms of vaccination rates. Right now, our eligible population is 62% versus a 57% national average for adults. So I think that moving forward, our strategic efforts really are beginning to see the beginning of, or the end of the beginning of this rollout, if you will. The Wayne Community College drive-through facility will be decommissioned. We will not be using that facility. It's 10 lanes and it has served us well. but we will be pulling back efforts to really focus our mass vax activities at the weekend and throughout the week at Autzen Stadium for the long haul, moving through the end of June. We intend to operate Lane Event Center on a continuing basis for just another couple of 3 weeks until such time as we will be reducing our capacity there. We will then free up those resources that we have allocated to weekend mass vax to being available for weekday, evening, lunch hour type pop-up clinics, doing mobile missions out to the community, doing a great deal more in the way of community-led clinics with our CBO partners, focusing more extensively on workplace vaccinations so that we can reach additional workers who potentially may not have sufficient downtime to be able to get to a vax clinic that we're running. So really pivoting from really kind of bringing the people to us in mass to really now beginning to focus on bringing the vaccine to the remainder of our population who are seeking vaccinations. We're also seeking to ramp up the availability of vaccine in our primary care providers and continuing to engage and do outreach to our primary care provider community to be able to have vaccine available to them in clinics, as well as our retail pharmacies throughout the county as well. So with that, Chair Bernie, I am more than happy and looking forward to any questions that the Commission may have.
Are you? No, thank you very much, Steve. This is the time for commissioners to ask any questions they might like. I see Vice Chair Farr's hand up.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. And I'd like to say that Mr. Adams' presentation today was thorough and complete. Really no great amount of questions other than just a point. As vaccination becomes available for 12 to 15-year-olds, I continue to hear from educators that finding incentive to induce the or to cause the 12 to 15-year-olds to be vaccinated is important. And I'm anxious to hear if the governor has something to say about that. And I've also made the request here locally to see how we can tag along with that. No need to answer at this point in time, Mr. Adams or Mr. Rickoff, but really keeping an eye on how do we get the 12 to 15-year-olds vaccinated. When we understand that in large part it is at the whim or will of their parents whether or not they will be vaccinated. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. That's a perfect teeing up of one of the comments I wanted to make. So thank you, Commissioner Farr. It is my understanding, Mr. Adams, that Oregon's consent to healthcare law does not require parental consent for those ages 15 and above, and immunizations are included on the list of healthcare services to which that law applies. Is that correct?
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, you are absolutely correct. And we are not requiring parental consent for individuals currently eligible at the 16 and 17 years old and compliant with Oregon law.
It's my understanding 15-year-olds would be within that. It's 15 and above, or over 14 is the.
Chair Bernie, that is correct, Commissioner Trieger. That currently, as of this moment as we speak, only 16 and 17-year-olds are eligible, but we're on the pathway to bringing the 12 to 15s, and in the 15s, under that scenario, later this week, we would also fall within that stipulation.
Thank you. Yes, and I did see that Lane County's clinics will be starting to take appointments, or taking appointments now, starting May 14 for the new age category. So thank you for that. My other question goes back to what you said, and as Commissioner Farr pointed out, access, people coming to mass vax clinics were the right bulk opportunity, and now it's taking the vaccine to people. So in previous reports, you had talked about a partnership with Meals on Wheels and other ways to reach more homebound and less mobile and more rural folks. I know some schools, for instance, South Eugene High School opened up 300 spots and they were gone in minutes. And I'm wondering also about working with larger employers for worksite clinics. Can you give us any update on those particular sites for vaccine?
Chair Bernie, I can, Commissioner Trieger. So indeed, 4J rolled the dice, and as to when the timing was going to happen, and in fact, it looks like their bet was a good one. So May 17 is being will be honored. They actually added some additional seats to that clinic, and we are providing the vaccine to support that activity. For the 12 to 15, we're, in addition to the particular contractor that is supporting those vaccinations, we will be stepping in and providing additional support to all of the 4J high schools, as well as Springfield South Lane, and then continuing to provide support to Bethel High School's area as well. So Wayne County Public Health staff will be going out and providing vaccine clinics at those sites. And that kind of bring the vaccine to the people. With respect to our workplace efforts, we continue to support those. We recently were at Oregon Ice Cream Company, as well as Attune Foods to provide vaccinations. Each of those yielded in the order of 75 to 100 shots, and we are very shortly going back for boost doses. As we begin to kind of ramp down from the really large scale weekend events, each of those requires 80 to 90 people on the ground for each day at each location. That does free up considerable resources to do much more in the way of mobile missions. On the issue, Commissioner Trieger, of our homebound individuals, we were very vexed in trying to figure out how best to address that issue. And we were exploring partnerships with Meals on Wheels and others. The Oregon Health Authority very helpfully put forward a contractor, Metro West, which took on that role and subcontracted with a number of rural ambulance providers. So they created a kind of centralized referral process that we've been able to utilize and get vaccine out to individuals. There was a little bit of a hitch because they were using Johnson & Johnson initially, and that was right as we went into pause and we had to make a switch to Moderna. But we have been working with the providers here in Wayne County to ensure that they had a steady supply of vaccine as they went through that process.
Great, thank you. And my last question, this may be more for administration. I know the governor was releasing $20 million in relief for businesses in communities that had been impacted by the extreme risk level. Do we know the status of that money coming to Lane County, and what is there an application process? Are businesses here locally able to access that?
If I may, Mr. Adams, Commissioner Trieger, I believe that's on our agenda this morning.
We'll be joined by Austin Ramirez later on in the agenda to talk about that very issue.
Thank you. I apologize for not tracking the agenda. Thank you.
Oh, no, that's fine. Was that it? Yes, Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you, Chair. So, Steve, the governor's announced or pre-announced that they're going to allow counties that reach the 65% first dose vaccinations of eligible populations, and they described eligible populations as 16 and up. So we're at 62%. If we reach that 65% and submit an equity plan for vaccinations, that we could be dropped down to low risk permanently, despite our case count, starting May 21st. So my question for you is are you aware of this equity plan requirement, and are we preparing to submit one, or in close contact with OHA about the requirements? Because it seems like we're going to be at the 65 by May 21st, at least first dose. So I want to hit that other mark. So can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I really think that's important for people like the Eugene M's and their restricted seating, and our restaurants and everybody else to be able to actually survive this financially.
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Bozievich, you have me at a disadvantage. I am not aware of this announcement. I know the governor is speaking today at 1:30, but we have not been advised. I am very eager to see what it is. We anticipated there may be some kind of reopening guidance associated with vaccinations, but we had no idea.
Okay,
Mr.
great.
I'm sorry.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Is there any other commissioner that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Wait. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gray. I was going to say something, but go ahead.
Oh, no, please, Chair Bernie, go first. And I have a few comments just to wrap up.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hey, you're doing pretty good, you know, as a stand-in.
Thank you.
Mr. Adams, first, I think we should acknowledge, thank God the University of Oregon is requiring all incoming students this fall to be vaccinated, following the footsteps of Portland State University and OSU. So I see that as a positive. I have a couple of comments, and some will circle back to what Commissioner Bozovich just said, but you mentioned 4 school districts. Arguably, they may be 4 of the larger school districts. There are 16 school districts in Lane County. Are you working with the Lane Education Service District for outreach to the other 12 school districts as it relates to this?
Chair Bernie, indeed, we have been close partners with Tony Skirdo and his team, both in terms of vaccinating their staff as well as bringing vaccination opportunities to the other school districts. We stand ready. We have teams available that can go out and provide vaccinations for any of our school districts right across the county.
Thank you. Answer I wanted to hear. And what is the methodology for selecting workplaces to set up pop-up vaccine things?
So, Chair Bernie, the methodology is quite simple. It's largely been outreach and engagement. Many of the workplaces have requested them. So we have been able to do outreach. We've worked with a number of businesses throughout the last 16 months or however long we've been at this, both in terms of contact tracing and helping them on the case front, and developed relationships with them. That effort continues currently, and it is a ready channel for us to outreach and ask if folk are interested in vaccine clinics.
Now, wait. Methodology. So do you do this one-on-one with businesses? Do you go through business organizations? Do you think there might be businesses in the county that are unaware of how to reach you, that have an interest? I mean, just asking for a tad more detail.
Yes, I'm happy to provide it, Chair Bernie. So I'm sure there are organizations or businesses out there that aren't aware that we are willing to go to clinics with them. Much of what we've been able to provide thus far are inbound requests. Wayne County, can you please come do a clinic at our facility? We've also done a number of clinics for agricultural and food processing facilities. You'll recall that they came into the eligibility window more quickly than many of the other essential worker businesses. And there was quite a lot of outreach, both at the state level and locally, in identifying some of those facilities, and we focus there as well. But by all means, as we move forward, as we begin to put much more emphasis on the mobile clinic model as opposed to the mass vax model, we intend to amplify our outreach more broadly, including our business organizations. I think that's a fine idea.
Thank you very much. I'm going to request that in your presentations and in materials we receive before them in our board packets, you list schools and workplaces that these units have been set up at and how many vaccinations, because as you have said, we are now moving into really the challenging phase of this. We're moving from people that want it to people we need to get it as we approach herd immunity. Now, if that would be all right.
By all means, it would be my pleasure.
Thank you very much. And I did want to speak to Commissioner Bozovich's point. I don't know exactly what the governor is going to say. However, I'm guessing it might sound a little like this. For counties that have 65% or more of their eligible people vaccinated, they will immediately go to low risk and never be moved from low risk. I'm not saying that's what will be said, but I can say that's one of the things that has been discussed. They will. I also wouldn't be surprised if she talks about incentives specifically with dollars attached, specifically to reach those harder to reach groups. And I think the degree to which you have that listing that talks about school and work site will be in a good position. Now, I have, at the direction of our county administrator, while many, if not most, all other counties have been saying our mass vaxes are done, we're not using all this supply anymore. My message has been Lane County wants all the supply Lane County can get. Anyone that's not using any, we want it. I know our vaxes amount have increased that we've received as a result of a lot of things, including that. How are we doing? Didn't we get 26,000 or something like that vaccinations for this week? And are we, in fact, are they all finding their ways into arms? Are we still, hitting that bullseye right now?
I think so. I think obviously it is slowing. We no longer are operating under a model in which we have scarcity of vaccine. It has hit us in the last couple of weeks. We had a very low allocation 2 weeks ago, as you'll recall, Chair Bernie, and you elevated that successfully. So that, I think we could have gotten a few thousand more doses in arms that weekend had we not been saddled with a mere 9,000 doses. This week, we're operating with 26,000 doses. It will take us longer to move doses. I don't think that we're going to be able to move them as quickly. So the 7-day mark that we've held ourselves to since the beginning of the rollout process, I think is going to have to lengthen. But we will continue to move vaccine both through our efforts as well as through our various distribution channels.
Thank you very much. And I promised a gentleman named Charlie Vader, who's in his mid-70s. He's a vet, and all he's doing, his life mission now, is to talk to other vets to get them vaccinated. And he wanted you to know that that he's turned, this is his term, he's turned several people to get vaccinated. However, what he's finding, the big objection, is if they felt vaccinations would be worth it, i.e. if they could get into restaurants and not be counted as part of that maximum occupancy, he feels that would help him. So I know, that's just one person, but still, as the governor's office provides incentives, it might be something to look at. Thank you for allowing me all this time. Are there any other commissioners before Mr. Rickoff would like to address this? Mr. Rickoff.
Chair Bernie, commissioners, thank you. It was most excellent that you went first because it saved me about 90% of my closing comments. I just did want to flag for the fact that with Dr. Lutke, Dr. Warren, and Steve Adams, there have been plans for the last 6 to 8 weeks to bring on an equity officer into the EOC. For about the last month, we have had an equity officer in our EOC and a very active engagement plan. This is something that we have done and we've done well. So whatever might come in terms of equity engagement, I think the county is very well placed to be able to respond to those issues and concerns. It's really the work we've been doing. Chair Bernie, you're absolutely on point. We are at the pivot point. Up to now, we have not had enough doses available for those who have wanted them and needed them. We are just starting to really look at how do we address hesitancy. We certainly see this as part of the effort with our EOC that is working with the business community to look for opportunities to collaborate and partner. And you will have Austin Ramirez with you later talking about the economic resources coming in to help distressed businesses, but it would be a good reminder for him to encourage those connections and the work with our chambers to be very active in helping to support this effort. Steve Adams also works with, on a weekly basis, the city managers throughout the county, as well as with the superintendents. And we are very active in helping those homegrown efforts throughout the county get engaged, get vaccines, work with our search and rescue or other vaccination teams to get as innovative as we possibly can. So very soon now, we started the conversation these past 2 weeks, really starting to look at hesitancy strategies. And we'd love to hear your ideas on how to continue to address hesitancy as we move from folks really in demand of the vaccine to those who might be a little bit more hesitant. And thank you, Joe Burney, for mentioning the University of Oregon. That is a big deal. We're very pleased to see that they worked to get in alignment with their bargaining units so that it is not just students, but it is faculty and staff as well who will be required to be vaccinated. That is a transformative statement by the U of O, and we see that as a great partnership.
Any other comments? Steve, that was a great report. Thank you. It feels like with Commissioner Buck and Commissioner Trieger and Commissioner Bozovich and Commissioner Farr, we all may be joined in an historic moment when we actually together help our communities get out of this and get life back to normal. So with that, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Chair Burney, Commissioners.
We are on item 7, consent calendar. Commissioner Trieger has removed, well, actually, what we did on her behalf, has removed item 7B2 from the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Burney? Yes.
Thank you, Chair Burney. I move the passage of today's consent calendar with the exception of item 7B2, which is confirmation of the Transportation Advisory Committee members, which has been pulled by Commissioner Trieger.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
The consent calendar with item 7B2 removed has been moved by Vice Chair Farr, seconded by Commissioner Buck. Discussion to the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nays, same sign. Let the record show that the consent calendar with item 7B2 removed, made by Vice Chair Farr, seconded by Commissioner Buck, has been unanimously approved 5-0. At this time, shall we look at items 7B2, and perhaps Commissioner Trieger, you could discuss why you wanted to pull that and what you would like to discuss.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, I'm not opposed to moving forward on this appointment process, but it was an important opportunity for me to raise our process around committee appointments. And I do have a couple of clarifying questions. I have spoken with staff, and I believe Ms. Vartanian is on the line, and so can confirm some of our conversation. But I had some questions about, it's my understanding that it was a little unusual to have not only the number of applications for this particular committee that we had, but the quality and the qualifications of the folks applying. And yet one of the people that were being asked to approve appointment of did not submit application materials. And so that was a question and of concern to me. If I'm going to be voting to approve appointment, I think all applicants should be held to the same standard and asked to submit the same material. So we have that before us in making the appointment. So I wanted to pull this from consent calendar as an opportunity to talk about and maybe make a request later, an agenda request of county administration, that we save some time either somewhere later this summer on an agenda or perhaps as part of our strategic planning process to talk about the role and purpose of our committees, how we recruit for them, how we screen people in and make those appointments, particularly as it relates to our commitment to equity work and our valuing of community volunteers and community engagement as a resource to be a more transparent and inclusive local government. My one question that I wanted to have answered also relates specifically to the length of term for these appointees. They're 4-year terms, and yet it indicates their terms would start in May of this year and run through December of 25, which is actually 4.5 years. So there were just enough questions, and just as a broader topic that I would like to flag for more discussion is why I wanted to pull this from the consent calendar.
Thank you, Commissioner. All of those sound like valid reasons to pull it and to have the discussion. Are there any commissioners that would like to discuss? Yes, Commissioner Buck.
I'll add something to a particular point. We have had a number of applications, and I think what may be sparking that interest is the upcoming or anticipated transportation infrastructure bill before Congress, and that may or may not pass. That still needs to come to fruition, but I think it has piqued a lot of people's interest who happen to be in that field. As the liaison to the track committee, I find that really exciting because when I first started in 2019, there were some vacancies at that point, and it was a struggle to try to get a number of applicants in. So I find that to be good news for Lane County. And hopefully people know that there's a long process to eventually getting an infrastructure bill that would roll down to the point where we would have county volunteers look at what we can and cannot do with that information. But I just find it really, really exciting to see so many wonderful applicants. I do have to say that I was missing one applicant, some material. So I wasn't sure if it was just missing or what the status was there.
Is that a question? Yes, please.
Sorry, Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, and Buck. This is Sasha Bartanian on the line to answer any questions you have. I apologize for the oversight in including the applicant, or not applicant, Jim Torrey's application in the materials. He was appointed rather than applied, and so I failed to ask him to fill out an application. He has since then filled it out, and it is in the mail, to clarify that piece. And then in terms of the question around terms, I took the liberty of bumping up the year, and perhaps I should have bumped it back instead of forward, so that the term ends at the end of the year, which aligns with when commissioners' terms also change.
Commissioner Buck, did you want to follow up with anything, or? Commissioner Trieger, I saw your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick clarifying question too. It's my understanding, is this true for all of our boards and commissions, that where commissioners have the opportunity to appoint, but the applicant or the appointee is not required to live within that commissioner's district? Is that correct?
No, they are required to live within the commissioner's district. That's from my understanding.
Well, just in discussion, if I may, when I first came on, the budget committee appointment from Springfield did not live in Springfield. And to this day, I'm just referring to budget committee because we're living it. Budget committee appointments are not made to coincide exactly with terms of office. So I don't know where the precedents are or if that's important, but I just want to share that observation. Would any other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Farr, and then Commissioner Bozic.
Thank you. And that was a question that I asked when I was making my appointment for the Transportation Advisory Committee. We all know that Tom Pogue, my long-term appointee, passed away. And I had some difficulty identifying somebody once I found out, after asking public works staff, does this person need to be in my district? I had a number of people I could have appointed who were outside of my district, but I had some difficulty identifying somebody inside of my district. And so it took me a long time to actually make this appointment. And when I was making the appointment, I called and asked and suggested, and I presumed that any necessary applications would have been taken care of by public works staff. So Jim Torrey is my appointment, which I stand behind.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bozovich.
So I'll just note that each committee we make appointments to has a different set of rules relative to residency in commissioners' districts, whether there's direct appointments by commissioners or it's done by the board as a whole. And with budget committee, that 3-year term is actually statutory and not something we have discretion over. So just so you know, that's where everything comes through various things, and you actually got to look at the bylaws that this board has approved for each committee to make some of those determinations. So I believe Animal Services does not require that person live in the district the commissioner that appointed him, whereas for some reason Transportation has that requirement. Just I think part of it's Transportation has some regional aspects, so you want there needs to be some regional diversity as far as champions for projects in various areas. Not maybe so much with Animal Services. The budget committee, you're allowed to appoint people outside of your district. We have people right now serving that are not in the same district as the commissioner that appointed them. So just be aware that if you want to look at the appointment process, first go to the bylaws, or sometimes you have to actually go to Oregon revised statutes to figure out how that happens.
Thank you, Commissioner. That does raise a question for Sasha. It sounds like on the Transportation Committee, the appointment does need to live within the district of the appointing commissioner, correct?
Correct, Chair Bernie, that is in the bylaws.
And thank you. So, and in the bylaws, was it just a sort of flip of the dice, or is there something that talks about length of term and deciding to go with 4.5 rather than 3.5 years? Or is that a bylaw-driven decision?
I actually believe it is, but if you give me a second, I have the bylaws open. So continue your discussion, and when I find that specific area, I will respond. Apologies.
Ms. Vartanian has asked us for filler. I'm done.
Mr. Bernie, I'm happy to fill. Back to Commissioner Trigger's original point, the recruitment selection of committees, the role of committees, the length of terms, and really applying an equity framework to this. Of course, our committees, we do have in Lane Manual Chapter 3 an outline of the specific committees. We wanted to let you know, and this is from Judy Williams in the equity program, that this has come up in the racial equity listening sessions, and that this issue of committee representation is the next item that the county plans to have a root cause analysis connected to. So your timing is great. We do think that in the coming months, we're going to be able to bring this back and have a more thorough conversation about committees from an equity perspective and do some of the clarification that you're asking for.
Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Mr. Rickoff. That's very much appreciated. And I hope, as I mentioned earlier, we can, after hearing that report back, and again, maybe the strategic planning is the best place to have some more robust and iterative conversation as a body about our goals, leading with race as we are committed to as an organization, but not limited to our conversation, not limiting our conversation around that when it comes to greater diversity, inclusion, and development of community leadership and informing this board with community expertise. Thank you very much.
So,
Sorry, finally, it's my understanding that we are still anticipating the application material so that we are voting on these appointments with the full information, equal information from all the applicants. So I put it out to the group whether we want to wait to have those materials before making these appointments, whether that's going to create timing issues with the bylaws and seating the committee in full. I'm not sure how to proceed on that, but I'm struggling a little bit with taking the action of approving the appointments when we don't have the same application information and materials for all the potential appointees.
Commissioner Farr, in that Mr. Torrey is your appointment and he really is separate from people applying, do you want to make any comment here or not? Or do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I move approval of order 210511-02.
Is there a second?
Second.
Vice Chair Farr has made the motion to approve order 21-05-11-02 in the matter of confirming the appointment of Kalina Beard, Christy Thompson, and Jim Torrey to the Transportation Advisory Committee. Commissioner Bozovich has seconded. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Buck.
I don't oppose any of the people that were being appointed here today, but I do want to acknowledge what Commissioner Traeger is trying to state, for the public who is interested in being seated on these committees. I find it is unfair to those applicants who did all the paperwork that they needed and submitted those applications to see people appointed who didn't even apply. So I look forward to having the discussion later when we do talk about, the equity portion of our committees. If I didn't know who Jim Torrey was and all the service that he's done to our community, I probably would not vote for somebody who hasn't submitted any application for the seat. Whenever I have a seat open, whether I'm allowed to appoint somebody without an application or not, I always seek out applications and ensure that they're filled and complete before I appoint anybody. So I just feel like that is a transparency piece that we really need to be sensitive to the public.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr.
Chair Bernie, I'm sensing the lack of support for this motion, so I'm prepared to withdraw it and pending the receipt of the necessary application. And I'm sorry that it didn't go through the process directly. I presume that once again, when I spoke with Public Works, that any paperwork would be completed. So with the approval of the second, I'll pull this motion and look to restate this one week from today.
Commissioner Bozovich.
I somewhat object to that. The ability of a commissioner to make a direct appointment is part of our job. And I go out sometimes and seek people to serve on community committees, on citizen committees, because I know they have an expertise to share, that they may not even apply or even be aware that that committee exists. The current chair of our budget committee is one such person. I went out and sought him because I understood his ability to review a budget and deal with it. And I don't think there's anybody that would challenge Mr. Vlogman's ability as far as our budget goes, and has served well. I went out and sought him. I didn't, ask for people to submit a bunch of applications to me. I knew he had that expertise. And there's been other occasions where I have gone out and found people that I knew had the expertise to serve those committees well that may not have ever decided to apply. I think that's something that is in the purview of individual commissioners to do. We can talk maybe later about changing those rules, But right now, that's the way the rules are, and I don't believe we should be pulling this. I think we should be moving it forward because Commissioner Farr has exercised his purview per the current rules. If you want to change those rules, that should be a separate motion and discussion. But right now, Mr. Torrey deserves an up or down vote, and I will not withdraw my second.
Okay, I would like a statement here, if I might, and that is that I also have solicited people, and after I've solicited them, I've asked them to turn in an application. And what I'm hearing actually is not a fundamental disagreement at all, just what I'm hearing. And I expect to be corrected after I make this statement, is that for the sake of transparency, even if we solicit appointments, when it gets to the board for approval of those appointments, applications ought to be complete. This to me is just basic. It's not, a condemnation or a criticism of any appointment or a commissioner's authority or role in making appointments and soliciting people for them. It's just really a matter of transparency when it reaches this body for an up or down vote. That's what I heard. Yes, Commissioner Tree.
Thank you, Chair. That is, I couldn't agree more. What you said is absolutely right. Commissioner Bozovich, absolutely, I agree. That is part of our job. Our constituency is a group that we know and should be going out and encouraging and building that bench of leadership and identifying experts in the community. Identifying one expert does not mean there is that they have cornered the market on the expertise or the interest or ability to be appointed. I'm not arguing that it's the job of commissioners to identify potential applicants. I'm agreeing with that portion of what you said and also with what Commissioner Burney said. And again, as I said at the top of pulling this, it was to raise the issue of our overarching process for recruiting, vetting, and appointing members to our boards and commissions, not to change the policy in any way here in this moment. I'm reading the board packet, which is what I have to go on as I prepare for our meetings. And it says that the 3 openings were advertised. And so that is our process. And when there's an opening, people complete applications. And that was all my statement and point in raising this forward at this time.
Thank you. So, Mrs. Vartanian, I can't see you. Did you want to say something?
Yes, Chair Burney. I just wanted to express my apologies for the oversight and not soliciting the application from Mr. Torrey earlier. That is on me completely.
Given that, Mr. Rickoff, did I see your hand up?
Yes, sir, Chair Burney, commissioners, this is on us. This is a staff issue and not anything that the vice chair did in terms of his application. And this is sometimes as we are moving fast on a lot of fronts, we forget pieces or don't get them in the right order. We do expect to have the application. It has been filled out. We know it's on its way. We will have it for you next week. But this is a staff issue. So I just wanted to make that clear.
This is the first time I realized that staff are human and sometimes make mistakes. I would like to just comment that the second has not been withdrawn. The person in question has submitted an application and is the appointment of Commissioner Farr, who has the right to do that. He is well known in our community. So I think on the one hand, I agree with Commissioner Trieger that moving forward, let's not make this mistake again. Let's be fully transparent. But I'm also prepared to vote on the motion. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Farr, you made the motion. Commissioner Bozovich refused to withdraw his second. What is your pleasure?
To vote, Chairman.
Okay. Given all the discussion, All those in favor of Order 21-05-11-02 in the matter of confirming the appointments of Kalina Beard, Christy Thompson, and Jim Torrey to the Transportation Advisory Committee, please signify, if you're in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Let the record show that Order 21-05-11-02 motion made by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Bozevich, has been unanimously approved 5-0. We are now on item 8, County Council. Mr. Dingle, do you have announcements?
Chair Bernie, there are no announcements.
That brings us to B, Order 21-05-11-03, in the matter of amending Lane Manual Chapter 60 to modernize language and processes. And is Mr. Cheney here to walk us through this?
Yes, I am, Chair Bernie. Let's see, you have before you a proposed change to Lane Manual Chapter 60. As you know, the Lane Manual is primarily a policy manual that establishes the policies that the staff carries out in the operations of the county. Chapter 60 itself deals with the heading of use of county facilities, but really it's two parts. Primarily, one, there's a compendium of fees that the county charges for various things. And secondly, there are the rules for disposal of personal property, that is goods that are owned by the county and not needed. So these changes go to both parts of that manual. Right now, the fees section of the manual runs to some 40 odd pages. The original intent of this, so far as we're able to surmise, was to create an encyclopedia where the public could go and know what any fee that was charged for anything in the county was. However, technology has moved on past that now, and the public doesn't go to the Lane Manual for such things. And where the public goes is to the county's website. And trying to coordinate these between the county's website and the Lane Manual, and then taking a policy manual and taking such fees as photocopying, and then other fees, such as the fees that are set by contract that we charge for medical treatments that are funded by the state, creates a large burden on the staff and on the board to review all these changes, whereas without a whole lot of input on the process. So the recommendation here is to do two things, is to remove the publishing of the fees charged by the county in the Lane Manual, and instead require them to be posted on each department or division's webpage, and at the same time to create a central webpage where a person who's interested in the county's fees can go, that would be in the finance area, that they can go and find out any fee that's charged. That doesn't mean there wouldn't be oversight by the board on what the fees are, because the changes would say that except for those that are set by statute or contract, the fees before they are revised by any department would be sent to the Finance and Audit Committee, which includes a commissioner, so that there would be oversight, and any that had a policy implication would then be referred to the board for approval prior to implementation. That's set one of the changes. The second set is much less extensive and just deals with making it easier to dispose of county surplus personal property. As you might imagine, technology changes mean that we have lots of file cabinets, and we have other things that were used for one reason or another, or perhaps pieces of equipment, especially vehicles, that come near their end of their service life. Historically, these were auctioned off, but we live in a society that's a lot more disposable now, and there is a lot more competition out there for people donating or getting rid of materials, making it very difficult for us to sell. We can have auctions and nobody comes. So for a lot of these materials. So these are mainly tweaks to that, to give more discretion when we have, for instance, an end of service life piece of equipment that's been used by Public Works or maybe a wrecked piece of equipment that might be sold to one person who might be interested in that, or we can go out to resources to make it so that we don't accumulate this material in our yards, or alternatively scrap it or send it to the dump. So that's the two kinds of changes that are here. I also need to mention one other thing, which is in section 60.4051A, an administrative correction, that I used the term when I drafted this, financial officer, which is used elsewhere in the lane manual. However, that isn't a specific term. And so the administrative correction was that that would be the finance director. So that is a specific designated person. With that, that's the summary, Chair Burney, commissioners. I am open to any questions.
Questions, commissioners? I see no questions. I see no questions, Mr. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Buck, forgive me.
It's not a question. I just was ready to make a motion.
Please.
All right, I'll move order 21-05-11-03 in the matter of amending Lane Manual Chapter 60 to modernize language and processes.
Is there a second? Mr. Trieger seconded. Before I asked, I apologize. Okay. Order 21-05-11-03, moved by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Trieger. Discussion of the motion.
Chair Burney, may I ask if it's clear that that includes the administrative correction to the that I read?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The maker of the motion said absolutely. Therefore, what we will vote on will absolutely include that one item. I do have a question for you, Mr. Cheney. How have you made it? Have you made any changes so that county employees who know about surplus equipment have the ability to personally benefit from any of the changes that you're proposing?
Chair Burney, commissioners, actually there are limitations on how this material is sold, and as our county council will tell you, we scrutinize very closely anytime there is any kind of sale to a county employee. Occasionally, we might get an offer or a bid on real property or on personal property, and those get referred to us to scrutinize and to make sure there's no insider trading or anything like that. Most of the value is done either through the annual auction of fleet, or is done through Craigslist sites or specialist websites that do auctions and sales. So we get good coverage, and it's very rare that we get an offer from a county employee.
Thank you very much. I interpret that as a no. Yes, Mr. Dingle, before we take a vote.
Yeah, I was just going to, Chair Burney, I just would want to emphasize what Mr. Cheney said. We've had situations, for example, where we have publicly advertised a specific piece of property, and it turns out that the only person who expressed interest, not surprisingly, was one of our employees that was owned property adjacent to it. And in that instance, we actually required that before we would agree to the sale, that an independent appraiser go out and appraise the property, so that there was total transparency, and there was no indication that this person was receiving some sort of special benefit simply because they were an employee.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further comments or questions, all those in favor of the motion to approve order 21-05-11-03 made by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Trieger, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Let the record show that this order 21-05-11-03 was approved unanimously, 5-0. Mr. Dingle, Item 8C, first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing ordinance 21-02 in the matter of amending Chapter 2 of Lane Code to require local public bodies to pay costs associated with Lane County's collection of fees or taxes, excludes ad valorem taxes, adopts a saving and severability clause. Please.
Chair Bernie, members of the board, again, and for those who might be watching, just a quick review of what this is. I believe it was Commissioner Bozovich who brought this issue forward. But this simply means that any local body that passes a fee or a tax, and it requires the county to collect that tax, that it pay the cost of collecting those taxes or fees. And it does exclude ad valorem property taxes because there's an Oregon Court of Appeals case directly on point. A number of years ago, Washington County attempted to assess a fee for the collection and distribution of ad valorem property taxes. That's why it's not in there. This is simply the first reading and setting a public hearing for May 25th, 2021 at 9 a.m. for a time certain.
Are there any questions or comments by members of the board? Commissioner Buck.
My only concern is that we just set another reading at that exact same date and time. But maybe if they're both advertised at the same time, that's not a problem. I just was double checking.
Chair Bernie,
Yes.
this is Diana. We standardly do that. We notice all of our 1:30 time certains at 1:30, and they just flow with the agenda, so they'll both be listed back to back.
Does that accommodate that concern, Commissioner? Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. Mr. Dingle, what do you need from we need a second and a vote. I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Bozovich.
So I was going to move approval of the first reading and setting the second reading and public hearing for ordinance 2102 for May 25th for 9 a.m. time certain.
Is there a second?
I will second it.
Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a brief clarifying question for council, just making sure I'm reading the numbers correctly and the timeline so that if we need to make any adjustments. The ordinance wouldn't apply to the 33,000 initial, which is basically the 6,500 annual cost times 12, right, for the first year. I guess I'm trying to figure out how the timing lines up. If this was enacted January 2020, we're already several months past 21. So I'm just trying to understand the dollar amounts and the timing and how they line up. And also want to be sure I'm understanding the $8,805 was the cost to develop the collection tracking software, right? But the 33,000 is the annual rate times 12, the monthly rate times 12, the monthly cost times 12. So I'm just wanting to make sure I understand all the dollar amounts, the numbers, and what does or doesn't apply should this ordinance pass.
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trier, yes. So what happened is when the board discussed this, and I believe, like I said, I believe it was Commissioner Bozovich that brought this forward. You heard from, I believe it was Mike Finch at TS, the costs that were involved in creating the software and all the staff time that went into doing that, which is separate and apart from that. Commissioner Bozovich was very clear, and the board was very clear that the intention of this ordinance as it moved forward was to not be retroactive for those costs. In other words, it would just be going forward. Now, what it would mean would be that in the future, if a year from now another public body did that, we would be recovering the cost of development. And Commissioner Bozovich can speak to this himself, but my understanding of that was that it was a somewhat fairness provision, which is they know the city did not know this going forward or when they did it, but other bodies will know this going forward. So that was the thought process there. And what it would be is it would just be an annual contract, so it wouldn't necessarily be tied to a calendar or fiscal year, to answer your next question. And that's why it says that within, that there has to be an intergovernmental agreement in this, the only one that's on the plate, that's on tap right now is the one with the City of Eugene's payroll tax. And that's how we have agreements with, for example, well, we pay the City of Eugene, I think Commissioner Bozovich mentioned this, to collect our transit room taxes. So that's the issue with the timing.
But the way this is written, if I'm looking at page 3 of the cover memo, the bottom of page 3 and moving into the top, it looks like if we pass this, it would apply moving forward from when it's adopted to the City of Eugene for the annual $6,500. It only is exclusive of the initial setup costs, which is not exactly what you just said. So I'm wanting to get clarity on that.
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, if I didn't, that's what I meant to say. We are only, as it applies to the City of Eugene, that it simply says we will not retroactively attempt to collect the creation causes, like the costs, excuse me. So you're correct. Going forward, it will only be the annual costs associated with collecting the City of Eugene tax. However, if another public body created a tax or a fee and it required us to create a software or involve staff time to set up the process, they would have to pay that in addition to the annual cost of collecting.
Got it. So this doesn't apply to the initial setup or the first year, the way it's written now, but it will apply for each year moving forward to the City of Eugene, to the payroll tax. That's how I interpret what you've written in the cover memo.
Okay, well, it has a 30-day it has a 30-day period for them to sign an IGA. So it's not intended to give them a free year. It would be that they would sign an IGA within 30 days, reach an agreement with us, or we would stop collecting the tax. That was the intention. And it's actually more than 30 days, I should say, because it doesn't have an emergency clause. So the ordinance doesn't even take effect for 30 days. So that was taken into account.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, I'm happy to chat more with you offline about that, so that the future cover memo, when this comes back to us, maybe addresses this.
Okay, I can do that.
And I thank you, Commissioner, because we are running a bit late. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. I was just going to state that, we can't go retroactive even on the monthly costs, but once we pass the ordinance, waits the 30 days and becomes effective, that starts the clock. Then any costs from that day of the effective date of the ordinance forward are eligible to be recouped. So we would, it wouldn't be the full year of 2021. It'd be whatever that effective date is forward. And if after 30 days the city, did not sign, that would, basically say we could stop collecting, and we just, turn over the amount of tax collected to date and deal with that at that time. But the main thing is also it just sets up a process for any other jurisdiction that chooses to create a tax that requires us to incur cost to collect. And going forward, everybody will be under the same rule.
The motion on the floor is to set the second reading. Is that correct? Are there any other commissioners that want to make any statements before we call on a vote on the motion on the floor? It's been moved and seconded that we set a second reading and public hearing on ordinance 21-02. Help me with the time. Is it May 25th, 9 a.m. time certain?
Chair Bernie, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. All those and I intend to have discussion then, not now for me. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Setting the second reading of ordinance 21-02 for May 25th, 9 a.m. time certain. has been unanimously approved 5-0. And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that this motion was made by Commissioner Bozievich and seconded by Commissioner Farr, I think.
Chair Bernie, if you mind, I can address the concern, or the Commissioner Trieger's question. There is a typo.
I'm sorry. I'd like to do that at our second reading because we're running a little late and there are several of us that have noon meetings that we will not make. If that's all right, Mr. Dingle. Thank you very much. We are now on County Administration, 9A, Order 21-05-11-04, in the matter of ratifying the fiscal year 21-22 Regional Wastewater Program Budget and Capital Improvements Program as approved by the Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission. We have several people here. Mr. Rickoff, could you introduce the group?
Chair Bernie, Commissioners, let me simply turn it over to Mr. Stouters, the Executive Director, and we can dive right in and try to catch up on time.
Thank you.
Hello there. Good to see you, Commissioners. For some reason, I can't see myself on screen, but it says my camera is on, so that's a little bit odd. But I will just, we'll get started, and wanted to introduce myself, Matt Stouter, the Executive Officer with MWMC, and with me today, Catherine Bishop, who is our Environmental Services Program Manager for City of Springfield, and Dave Breitenstein, Wastewater Division Director for City of Eugene. It's our pleasure to be here today. We'll see here. Can you see my screen?
No, what we see, oh, can you, Commissioner Bozievich? I see a blank screen.
We can see the PowerPoint.
We can see the PowerPoint. That's what I was shaking my head yes about.
Sorry. Matt, for whatever it's worth, we see your PowerPoint. We see everyone with your group. We don't see you.
Okay. Let me try one more thing real quick. There we go. Different platform. I'm not used to that. Sorry about that. Okay. We'll move on here. We'll do a brief overview. We'll keep it high level in respect for time today. Really briefly talk about the history of the MWMC, a little bit about our facilities, and then our regional budget. So some of you have seen this presentation in the past, but for those of you who haven't, really the Clean Water Act is the foundation of what it is that we do at MWMC, and it passed in 1972 in response to dramatic pollution in the nation's waterways. In fact, on the right is a picture of the Cuyahoga River in Ohio that was so polluted it was ignited by a spark from a passing rail car. Since that time, in 1984, our regional wastewater treatment facility came online, and ever since we've been working to make improvements to water quality moving forward. I would point out, new this year is that for 2021, at the end of this year, the MWMC does expect a new NPDES permit to be issued to us by the Department of Environmental Quality, and that will drive future work for us, and this budget does contemplate that. So our commission is made up of 7 members, 2 from Lane County, 2 from Springfield, and 3 from Eugene. Commissioner Farr served as our president for the past year, and we were very appreciative of that. Commissioner Bozievich has also served on our board, as have others in the past. And we have a service area that you can see here. Really, it's the city limits, the urban growth boundaries for each city. It does include, for the county, the unincorporated areas out in Santa Clara, and then we also provide service for mobile waste haulers and septic haulers outside of DUGB. The city, in the partnership, Springfield is responsible for administrative functions, things like capital project and planning and project delivery, education and outreach, budget development, that sort of thing. And Eugene does the operations and maintenance for our facilities. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, we have an advanced secondary treatment plant, which receives an average of 33 million gallons a day with much more capacity to service well into the future. The treatment plant uses a combination of physical and biological treatment to remove solids and dissolved organics and ammonia these substances would otherwise, if discharged to the river untreated, would deplete dissolved oxygen in the river and be toxic to fish and other aquatic life. And then also prior to discharge, we disinfect the wastewater. And before it goes into the Willamette through regulation by DEQ under a national permit program. And the plant has been operated very well. We've been 100% compliant with our discharge permit for the past 14 consecutive years. The solids that are removed at the treatment plant are sent out to our biosolids management facility for additional treatment and processing to produce biocycle, which is a valued soil amendment and fertilizer for agricultural land application. And we apply that seasonally to grass seed crops on nearby farmland and to MWMC's own poplar tree farm. The MWMC purchased about 600 acres adjacent to the management facility about 15 to 20 years ago. And we did this to help ensure availability of property for beneficial reuse application for the foreseeable future. And poplar trees were selected because of their higher nitrogen uptake over grass, which helps keep hauling and application costs lower, and because it maximizes the application rate that we can apply in terms of pounds per acre. And this site serves as a safety net for MWMC in the event the local grass seed farmers, for whatever reason, if they were to lose interest in receiving biosolids in the future. Otherwise, to put all these solids in a landfill would be extremely expensive and not serve any beneficial purpose. And we're now approaching, we're about to embark on the harvest of the last phase of plantings. The poplars were planted in 3 different phases. And so this 3rd phase is now 12 years old, which must be harvested under agricultural land use rules. So we're planning on doing that this summer. And the harvest of all these trees, it has produced a variety of wood products, primarily pulp chips and hog fuel. But we've also had some experience with milled lumber that is with some manufacturing of them into ceiling grills. That was a partnership with Ninewood over in Springfield. So that's what I have for you here.
Okay, so in terms of the budget approval process, we kick off our budget on the regional program in January and have meetings every month. And when we get to April, that's when the commission makes a decision on if they're going to adopt the budget. On May 11th, you can see on the slide that it was ratified just last night by the city of Eugene. We're here today with Lane County for ratification by Lane County. And our next stop will be the city of Springfield on May 17th. And then on June 11th, we'll have final adoption by the MWMC.
So our work program and budget are really driven by key outcomes and associated indicators. They're listed here, as well as our strategic plan that the commission adopted in the last year. I would note that we're continually looking to tweak our indicators that are in the budget document, and the commission has embarked on a robust process to revise those this year. As we move forward and achieve the indicators associated with the key outcomes, that really tells us that we're meeting the needs of the regional wastewater program.
Okay, and here's the adopted rate that the commission approved, and it's effective July 1. It's a 3.5% increase in user fees. I would like to point out that in this current fiscal year, we did remain level with user fees. So there was no increase in fiscal year 2021 by the regional program or by the city of Springfield or the city of Eugene for utility rates. So now going into July 1st, we do have a 3.5% user fee change. And really what that means is if you're a customer with 5,000 gallons of wastewater treated, your bill would be $27.97. However, our regional average is closer to 4,000 gallons, which would be $25.18. Again, there's customers that have higher usage or lower usage, and it's just one component of the bill. Next slide. This is a summary of the Springfield and Eugene combined regional budget. You can see that there's 4 categories. The overall change is 4.5%. We did add 1 FTE to that program. And then in terms of personnel services, it's just a 2.6% increase. Where we have the greater increases on materials and services, which is 7.5%. And some of that is directly related to permit fees from DEQ, increased costs having to do with utilities for the plant, including electricity and power, natural gas, and also wastewater and water, including chemicals. And so this just gives a chart that shows 5-year comparison of the adopted operating budgets. And when we look back at those budgets over the last 4 years, we end up with an average annual increase of 2.9%. So this year, we did increase the budget by 4.5%, which is close to $900,000. And but when we look back over the last 4 years, the average annual budget increase was 2.9%. Next slide.
Okay, this slide is a kind of a rolled up version of our 5-year capital improvement plan. And when I'm sharing this with folks, I always note that, water quality and wastewater cost, it's not cheap. It costs a lot to do what we do and to provide wastewater services and take that water and put it back cleanly to the Willamette River. So you'll note that it's about $22.8 million is our CIP for this proposed for this fiscal year. $90 million is our 5-year estimate. I would note that most of the costs are in plant performance improvements, and those are associated with water quality requirements in our permit. However, we are anticipating and budgeting more money in equipment replacement as the years move on, as our facilities age. And the last couple of slides we'll share with you have to do with our capital program, just highlighting a couple of projects that are in our CIP. The first one here is a renewable natural gas upgrades facility. We are partnering with Northwest Natural to take the methane gas that we create through our anaerobic digestion process, to take that, scrub it, clean it up, and put it back into the pipeline for use in the pipeline. The environmental attributes will be sold, and the resulting dollars will be a benefit to MWC and to our ratepayers to help offset rate increases in the future. Additionally, this is going to allow us to eliminate flaring associated with our biogas at the plant, which is good for the environment and good for us. And then moving forward, the Class A disinfection facility shown on the bottom of this slide is going to allow us to expand our reclaimed water use, both on-site and off-site at the treatment plant, up to 1.3 million gallons of water reuse per day. Hoping to partner with the City of Eugene for street tree irrigation for public acceptance for recycled water, as well as some of the aggregate suppliers in the community for industrial aggregate washing, for equipment washing and rock washing. And the last two planned projects moving forward, there's our aeration basin improvements, which will allow us basically to increase our dry weather treatment capacity and expand our optimization of our aeration basins, and then an analysis and then associated improvements of our administration and operations building, which is where we house a lot of our staff and operators at the plant, and was recently rated as the most critical piece of work that we should be doing with respect to resiliency in our disaster mitigation and recovery plan that was recently done. So with that concludes our presentation, and we request approval of the board order ratifying our budget, and we're also available for any questions Commission may have.
At this juncture, if I may, commissioners, it's time for questions or comments. I want to ignore Vice Chair Farr because I envy him for being on the MWMC board. I've always desired to do that, but he's pulled rank over me, but I have no choice. Commissioner Farr.
Well, thank you, Chair Bernie. I've mentioned it often to Matt and the rest of the staff that I've been wanting, I'm fulfilling a desire that I've had since 1995 when I first became a Eugene City Councilor. I always wanted to be on MWMC, and I was always trumped by somebody else until recently.
Yeah, I know how you feel.
But the work is absolutely fascinating, not just because of the technical nature of the work, but because of the outcome. And Matt, you know, and I praise you often about the quality of the work that the city of Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County engage in, the work that you do, and really there's far more than meets the eye, far more than this presentation that is occurring with MWMC, including one of my favorites, which is Wastewater University, where grade school and middle school age kids are able to access information regarding how the wastewater system works. It really is marvelous. It really is fascinating. A lot I could say about it, Matt, but I'll say more to you on Friday morning when we meet at 7:30 without breakfast. And I look forward to that. Chair Bernie, thank you very much. And Matt and Catherine and Dave, thank you very much for accommodating my sometimes dim-witted questions as I elicit answers from you about the technical nature of your work. It's amazing what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any other commissioners, questions, comments before we entertain a motion? I would just like to say that I first walked through your facilities about 12 years ago with leaders from Honduras, Guatemala, and I don't know if any of you were there then, but the tour you gave and the information that we learned was phenomenal. I think you are on the ground pragmatically implementing so many concerns for environmental groups, people concerned with climate, people concerned with recycling. You truly have my respect. Ms. Bishop, was I correct in reading a slide that said our Lane County Board of Commissioners would have this up for approval on May 12th?
For today.
Yeah. I was just going to be silly and point out today was May 11th. That's all. No big deal. Does anyone have the chair will entertain a motion at this point? Yes, Commissioner.
Chair Bernie, I move passage of Order 210511-04 in the matter of ratifying the fiscal year 21-22 Regional Wastewater Program Budget and Capital Improvements Program as approved by the MWMC. And after speaking, I'd like to speak to the motion, Chair.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Bozovich beat me to it. It has now been moved by Commissioner Farr, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich. Approval of Order 21-05-11-04. Is there discussion to the motion? Is there anyone other than Commissioner Farr that would like to have any discussion toward the motion? In that case, yes, Commissioner Farr.
Chair Bernie, only to call out the members of the MWMC, Peter Ruffier, who was the director of the plant in 1995 when I first received my tour, is now on the commission after spending his entire life in service in wastewater. Walt Meyer from Eugene, Doug Keeler from Springfield, Bill Inge from Lane County, Joe Piscineri, who is a Springfield City Councilor, and the current president, Jennifer Ye, who is a Eugene City Councilor. Matt, thank you once again, and I'll await the vote. Thank you.
I would exactly call that discussion. Is there any further discussion to the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving Order 21-05-11-04, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Let the records show that Order 21-05-11-04, motion made by Vice Chair Farr, seconded by Commissioner Bozovich, has been unanimously approved 5-0. And we want to thank you all for your work and for this presentation, and congratulations.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much. We are now on item 9B, Order 21-05-11-05, in the matter of extending the temporary exception to policy for applying and accepting federal and state grants, appropriations, allocations, or other fiscal aid arising from the COVID-19 pandemic and 2020 holiday farm fire. And Commissioner Trier, I can see why you just didn't immediately see how this related to the question you asked, but it does. And we have Austin Ramirez here to walk us through.
Thank you, Chair Bernie and Commissioners. And I think just to make sure we have enough time to discuss the newest round of business relief, we're going to do our best to cover that under the county administrator announcement so we don't cut that piece short. But yes, it was not readily available on the agenda, so I apologize for that. I do appreciate the time today to discuss this item, and we'll be quick. It's relatively straightforward. Robert Tintle is also on for any questions should they come up. Essentially, we're asking the board to adopt an order that will enact a second extension to the temporary policy exception related to grants. So this is specifically for grants and resources related to the holiday farm fire and COVID-19 response and recovery. The previous extension approved by the board in September expired at the end of 2020. So this second extension would take us through 2021. As you all know, significant state and federal resources related to both wildfires and the pandemic continue to become available for counties. The volume and timing of these opportunities requires as much of a streamlined process as possible to really allow us to be nimble enough to capture these really impactful opportunities. So this is critical not just for the competitive grant opportunities that we pursue, but also incredibly important for the direct allocations and the contracts associated with those that we receive from state and federal sources. Two very recent examples of that are the $2.4 million that's been mentioned for business relief from the state, as well as the ARP direct allocation and the contract for that. So, both those contracts are waiting in the contract system pending approval of this board order. So it really does streamline and help staff move things along so that we can focus on implementation of these dollars. We expect to continue seeing significant resource opportunities in the near and continued future, particularly as ARP dollars get diverted into multiple channels and streams through different state agencies. So we do want to have this flexibility going forward through the end of this year. This will really just greatly improve our efficiency and effectiveness in acquiring these dollars. So, and as a reminder, the order requires the county administrator to regularly update the board on these grants related to wildfire and pandemic aid. So there is a balance between speed as well as keeping the board informed, which is critical for when there's so many moving parts. So really with that, staff recommend the board adopt the order as written. I'm available to answer any questions.
If I may, Austin, please don't make a liar out of me. Were you going to speak to the 2.4 million or is that a separate item? Because that Commissioner Trieger brought this up earlier and I wanted to make sure it was addressed.
I think our plan, and Greg, assuming this is still all right, we were going to discuss that during the county administrator's announcements. There's enough meat there that we wanted to have that discussion separately.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and do that now, though, given the time.
Okay. Yeah. Happy to do that now. Is there do we need to wrap up this order, or I just want to make sure we follow the right process here?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Commissioners, do you feel with Austin's discussion and the material provided that you have enough information, or are there questions you would like to direct as it relates to this specific board order? Mr. Rickoff?
Chair Bernie, Commissioners, the reason why I think this is okay to wrap these two together is the 2.4 million, it will give you an example of exactly how we're using the authority you're providing to the county administrator, and that it's a continuation of our commitment and your commitment to disperse these funds in a thoughtful way that takes in issues of equity and inclusion as well as agility. So Austin, I was thinking you give this example and it will give alignment for why we're proceeding
Thank you, Greg.
Extension.
Thanks.
That makes complete sense. Okay, yeah, I'm happy to dive into the 2.4 million then, if that's all right. Really, and I think to have the discussion about the 2.4 million we've just received, it's important to just take a step back and think about the last round of business relief we did in December with the 3.8 million we received from the governor's office back then. So that round in December was the fifth round we had administered since, sixth round we had administered since March. If you recall, in March, we were actually the first county in the entire state to implement a business relief program for COVID impacted businesses. So we had a long history of acting quickly to support businesses. And so that sixth round in December was the most funding we'd had made available at once. And the demand for that funding was staggering. So we received 1,600 applications, which was far more than any amount we'd received in any previous round, for a total demand of $16 million. So we knew, seeing that there was no way we were going to award all the businesses who applied. We were able, though, to help 240 businesses, with the average grant amount being $15,000. So the grant amounts range from $7,500 if you were a sole proprietor, all the way up to $25,000 if you had between 16 and 25 employees. There was a general eligibility for that program, which was Oregon businesses and 501c3s that were impacted by the pandemic with 25 employees or less. We, as an organization, went a step further and created priority eligibility categories, really to focus the funding on those that need it most. So if you were meeting general eligibility and also were a business in the tourism, hospitality, or event sectors, if you had to close because of the governor's freezes, if you were minority owned, women owned, or service disabled and veteran owned, or if you were a rural business, you qualified under that priority eligibility. And so what we did, really learning from every round previously and taking those lessons and trying to improve accessibility and equity, is we created a two-phase lottery system with a very large application and outreach window. So we had 10 days of outreach, which at the same time businesses were allowed to submit online. And we sought, for communities that are especially hard to reach for infrastructure issues, communities that don't typically engage with government very well, we saw that 10 days used really well, and applications continued to roll in, and we continued to market and push and lean into our partners like chambers of commerce, like other business organizations, to really help get the word out as much as possible. And so following that 10-day period, we had that two-phase application process. First phase, 75% of that funding we received went to priority eligibility businesses. So 25% of the funding in the second lottery went to any business that met the general eligibility, and those that weren't awarded from the first lottery. So what ended up happening is, we look at the data, is 90% of our 240 awardees ended up meeting one of the priority eligibility criteria. So we really did reach those we were trying to most. And so looking at the 2.4 million we have now, and thinking about, this is one of the few rounds we've been given discretion on how to implement it. Because as you all recall, we received round after round of funding that had restrictions that prevented us from meeting the needs of our community best. And so, we have a wait list of almost 1,400 businesses from that round in December. And unfortunately, thinking about those priority categories, they've aged well, and that's not a good thing. That means that those are still the businesses that are disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and historically underserved. So we feel like we have an opportunity to honor that wait list, to honor the work that businesses have put in, to leverage the equity and accessibility from that round, and to really chip away at that wait list, which is something we've never been able to do. So what we are looking to do, and what we propose to do, is to, rather than invite a brand new application process, really directly reach out to those 1,400 businesses and let them know if they're able to recertify based on the eligibility, they will be entered once again into the two-phased lottery system. Based on how many we awarded in the first round, we're expecting probably help between 120 to 150, just depending on how the grant amounts work out. So we will still have a significant wait list, but we feel like this approach would be the best balance of equity, accessibility, and speed, because once we start running those lotteries, businesses will get that money in their bank accounts within 2 weeks at most. So they will get this money while they're at a tipping point when they need it. We're excited about the opportunity to help more businesses. It's also very humbling to know that there will be over 1,000 businesses that we won't be able to help. So the fight's not over. We're still looking for more resources, but this will help several businesses throughout the county. So any questions on that? There's a lot of information all at once. I apologize.
No. I want to thank you, and I want to agree with Greg that provides some flavor for what this entire order is all about. And I think, but we'll find out, responds to Commissioner Trieger's desire to understand this piece. So I'll hold any further comments. Do commissioners have any questions or comments for Austin on either the order or what he was discussing regarding the 2.4 million Lane County as an emergency risk level county received to support our business community? Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. And just for clarity's sake and in the interest of time, my question was specifically actually not related to this. It was the $20 million that the governor announced he was working with the legislature to release specifically to counties that have been put into extreme risk most recently. And I believe it's connected to commercial rent relief. I'm not 100% certain. So I just wanted a little more information about the process of accessing those dollars. They may not even be available yet, I'm not sure. So I think that is outside of, but in addition to this, and maybe something that's better for an update on next week.
I can touch on that briefly. It was hard to keep track of because there were very last minute changes with that 20 million, Commissioner Trieger. So it was actually proposed, as you mentioned, to go into commercial rent relief. And I don't think it's an understatement to say there was an outcry from business leaders that if they really wanted that funding to go towards businesses quickly and to those that needed it most, the commercial rent relief program may not be the right vehicle to do that. It just takes time. There are a lot of layers to that program. And so in the very final hour, actually, the governor decided to replicate her process from December and to distribute that 20 million between the counties. So it is very much the same funding. It just ended up not going towards commercial rent relief.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Bozievich.
Just while we're on the subject of that 20 million in relief for counties that were placed in extreme risk, there's an equity issue around that in general. There were counties that have been in extreme risk for months, like Umatilla County, and they weren't part of the 15 that got placed in that and were eligible for this 20 million. So there probably needs to be a wider statewide discussion about the equity of that particular relief program for 5 days of extreme risk versus the 21 weeks Umatilla County's been in.
Thank you, Commissioner. I believe that discussion occurred yesterday at some of our AOC meetings, and fortunately, we're going to discuss how we at least can spend down as efficiently and impactfully as possible the dollars that we were allocated. Any other commissioners? Statement, questions for Austin, questions for Greg? Yes, Commissioner Buck. Oh,
I don't have any questions, but I'm ready to move an order. If we're ready. All right, I'll move approval of order 21-05-11-05 in the matter of extending the temporary exemption to policy for applying and accepting federal and state grants, appropriations, allocations, and other fiscal aid arising from the COVID-19 pandemic and the 2020 holiday farm fire.
I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioner Buck has moved and Commissioner Trieger has seconded approval of order 21-05-11-05. Is there further discussion to the motion? Austin, what I would like to say that I believe the entire board is extremely appreciative to the work that you've done to get money out as quick as possible to those in most need. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Let the record show that Order 21-05-11-05, made by Commissioner Buck, seconded by Commissioner Trieger, has been approved unanimously 5-0.
Extending beyond the noon hour.
Are there any other administration announcements? 9C.
Chair Bernie, yes, please. I will be as quick as possible. Just wanted to share that we are in special election season right now. As of Monday evening, the voter turnout was 30,000 ballots. Roughly 11% of the voters have cast their ballot. We're a bit higher than the number of ballots received when compared to the last like election in 2017. The opening and pre-inspection of ballots begins Friday. We'll utilize approximately 110 paid extra help workers to successfully complete that task. We are asking voters to remember to be sure to sign their returned identification envelope so their ballot can count. The last day recommended for post office to return to, if you're going to mail your ballot, is tomorrow, Wednesday, May 12th, 2021. Otherwise, you're going to need to drop it at one of the 20 official drop site locations. Ballots must be received at an official drop site location by 8 p.m. on May 18th. There's still time to update your registration and receive a ballot. If you're registered anywhere in Oregon, check the status of your voter registration at oregonvotes.gov/myvote. We're going to reach out to elections prior to casting your ballot for assistance if it's needed. The phone hours are 9 to noon and 1 to 4, Monday through Friday, and will be open until 8 p.m. On May 18th. So that's it for elections. Any thoughts or questions there? You will note my snazzy sticker, my I voted. I do have extra copies of these for county commissioners. I'm happy to get them to you so you can go ahead and encourage all of our registered voters to vote. We have been talking about the American Rescue Plan. I know most of you noted that the Treasury guidance came out yesterday. It's 151 pages, and we hope to be able to update you all on our reading assignments next Tuesday. The number is, as we expected, $74,212,036. We expect that in 2 tranches this year and next. Finally, I just wanted to say that your commitment, commissioners, to serving the public is exemplary, and the timing of your service is often not within your control. With that said, and my deep apologies to Chair Bernie, happy birthday. That's it for announcements.
Do apologies come with happy birthday at a certain age? How does that?
Just outing you here at a public meeting on the record forever.
Thank you very much. Item 10, Commissioner Business. A, do commissioners have any announcements? Seeing none. 10B, future board assignment requests. Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. I have a particularly timely ask of the board and hoping to get head nods. I have been asked to be a witness for the U.S. Senate Finance hearing on infrastructure, my first congressional hearing, and that will be early next Tuesday. And I will need the assistance of Alex Kyler to get prepared for that particular congressional hearing, and it will take more than 15 minutes. So we will specifically be talking about rural broadband and infrastructure and needs for that. I'm hoping to get at least 3 head nods from the board to get approval for more than 15 minutes of Alex Kyler's time.
Forget it. I'm sorry. I don't, is there any need for discussion, or can we start nodding heads right now?
This is by invitation by NACO, by the way.
And Commissioner Bozovich, is that a hand or a head nod?
It's a hand. we had a presentation in AOC governance yesterday about broadband, and there is a flood of money available right now already, even without having it in the infrastructure package. I'm kind of curious what we're going to testify for based on that knowledge.
Well, I've been invited by Nico as a witness expert on rural broadband in front of the committee, probably to talk about those resources and how to best deploy them. But I'll be getting some prep meetings this week to get more in-depth information from the NACO team.
Okay. And Commissioner Bozovich, did you have anything else? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. And, you know, Mr. Kyler was not present at that meeting yesterday. He had other priorities, but a lot of good information came out through the broadband meeting yesterday, including some issues regarding public ownership of broadband. So I would expect that that's going to be an interesting presentation, Chair Buck.
Oh, now it's Chair Buck again, huh?
That's old, not hard.
The only comment I'll make, and then I will, if it's all right, ask for head nods, is that Commissioner Buck, no, I think that your presenting there is a wonderful opportunity for visibility for Lane County, as it does relate to, and Commissioner Bozovich is correct. There are dollars that are being targeted from multiple sources for rural broadband. For Lane County to have someone testifying to Congress on this issue is tremendous in multiple ways, and I'm just so pleased you have that opportunity. Are there any other comments? Mr. Rickoff.
Chair Bernie, Commissioner Buck, just want to be clear that Alex is aware of this and that every fiber of his being is ready to bring as much rural broadband financing to this county as possible. So you have our full commitment and you have our enthusiastic commitment to help with this.
Well, I think, Greg, before that can occur, we have to head nod. So, it's good to hear all 18 fibers of Mr. Kyler's being are committed to this. Now I'm going to ask for hand raises, all those instead of head nods, all those that approve of using, I think this is Commissioner Buck, what you're requesting, more than 15 minutes of Mr. Kyler's time to support you to testify before Congress on rural broadband. Please signify by raising your hand.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Are there any other announcements? 10A. 10B, future board assignment requests. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I think just going back to our conversation about committees, I would just leave it to administration to bring back to us their recommendation for how best to have that conversation and move it forward again, as whether it's part of our strategic planning conversations later this year, whether it's a board item. I'm not clear, but I don't want to lose track of the fact that that's clearly a topic that several of us on this board want to dig in a little more and come to a collective understanding about not only the right processes according to Lane manual and bylaws for the various committees, but what is the right and best path forward given our commitment to equity. Thank you.
So Commissioner Trieger, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not necessarily, although it might be a future board request, but you want to lean on staff to get back to us and identify where the appropriate place would be. Is that correct?
That's right. The assignment, the request is to bring to us a recommendation for how to embark on conversation on that topic.
Thank you. Commissioner Bozovich, you have to share. Oh. Are there any other future board assignment requests? Greg, I had one, but did you want to say something?
I was just going to remind you that you had one.
Thank you, Greg. Earlier, I had made a request that that was approved, that was to have a gentleman named Dennis Sando provide input on some of the discretionary priorities for this county to apply for or compete for as it related to other pots of money attached to the American Rescue Plan. I would like to modify that because the intent of that was to have community input. The intent was to have community input immediately after we receive staff recommendation for the first tranche of $37 million, which is going to make the county whole and to cover losses and one-time expenditures that are critical that we've lost the ability to make. I now want to modify that so that we're really talking about community input, that we have a board agenda item that provides community input on community priorities. And the reason for that is obviously Mr. Sando is one of those that will be invited, but I and other members of the board and staff have had other requests. Mine was from the Climate Advisory Committee. And so I would just like to make this, instead of a Dennis Sandow input, as we look at opportunities for additional funding, it become a community input, a structured community input work session around that topic to occur immediately after we've made decisions about the $37 million tranche. Is that vague enough? Is there any discussion on that? Could I ask could I ask for a show of hands to say, okay, we'll change what that's about? Thank you very much. Greg, do any other commissioners, in my haste I might have missed, have any other items for either 10A, announcements, or 10B, future board assignment requests, or 10C, Commissioner Katz getting in the way? Okay, hearing none. Greg, you're doing an outstanding job. Here's where we evaluate whether we even need Mokrahysky. Please.
Chair Bernie, commissioners, I know I need Steve Mokrahysky. I have 2 assignments, and I'm going to consider the committee roles and structures as an assignment given the board conversation, and then 1 alteration. The first assignment is Alex Kyler's assistance in preparing Commissioner Buck for a broadband testimony. The second is to return to the board with the committee roles and structures through equity access. I did hear from Judy Williams during this meeting that she felt it would be very appropriate to have this be part of the strategic plan, not to prejudge where this will end up, but that we will be returning to you with that. And then finally, we've altered the Dennis Sandow assignment to be a community input assignment after the first tranche of the American Rescue Plan funding, as we start looking at collective impact and the ability to do transformational work here in the community. What assignments did I miss?
I don't think you missed any. Did Greg miss anything, commissioners? I think we got it covered. At this time, Diana, before you read us into executive session, because we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 in executive session, I know that Commissioner Farr had wanted to make a statement.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. Before we convene in executive, before we convene in executive session, I wish to publicly declare a potential conflict of interest pursuant to RS 244-020, because my son is a member of AFSCME and the discussion tomorrow will involve AFSCME. If it turns out that tomorrow's discussion involves market rate adjustments, I may indeed have an actual conflict of interest.
Thank you, Commissioner. Diana, would you read us into executive session?
Yes, thank you, Chair Bernie. The Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660(2)D, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session, and the board reserves the right to come back into public session should the need arise. And just for clarification, this executive session will occur on Wednesday, May 12th at 9 a.m.
Thank you. We are now recessed. Thank you, commissioners.